If I could have your attention, please. I'd like to welcome you to this May 19th, 2022 City Council workshop. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Blackwell?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Matheny?
Here.
Councilmember Urban?
Here.
Councilmember Askew?
Here.
Councilmember Trace?
Here.
Our first presentation is by John Adams with R.J. Wooden and Associates. Is that correct? John, it's good to have you here. Looking forward to your presentation.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And we do appreciate this opportunity. I am with R.J. Wooden and Associates. We've been in business in Central Florida here since 1984. We have a lot of history here, and it was at the request of City Manager Sturgeon that we come and try to provide some history of the urban growth boundary, the urban strategy for growth management that Osceola County adopted, and subsequently that you all adopted through your JPA, your Joint Planning Agreement. So I just want to point out that I am not a policymaker. You all are, okay? I do have a history with this, and that's what I'm here to present, to try to give you a little bit of reasoning of why this was adopted. And if I could have my PowerPoint presentation up, I'd appreciate it. I do have a couple other members of our staff here, David Major and John Ryan Adams. David Major is our graphics specialist and manager, and John Ryan Adams is my retirement plan. So, urban development. What is urban development, but more importantly, why? Why do we need urban development? Obviously, Central Florida has developed in a semi-suburban and rural development pattern for many years. So why do we need, or why did Osceola County adopt urban development? Well, this goes back all the way to 2003. This was the Osceola County Comprehensive Plan in 2003, and if you look at all those multiple colors on that land use plan, they all meant something. The density in 2003 in Osceola County, including both the city of St. Cloud and the city of Kissimmee, was 1.04 dwelling units per acre. 2003 was an EAR-based amendment for Osceola County. The state requires an evaluation appraisal report of the comprehensive plan every 7 years. And in 2003, Osceola County initiated their EAR report and then their EAR-based amendment. The Growth Management Task Force at Osceola County identified multiple residential categories and multiple colors on the map. There's a list of just the residential categories that we had in 2003. And then we looked at multiple commercial categories, but all those commercial categories on land use had one color on the map. The commercial categories were located by roadway intersection criteria. The higher intensity, the more roadway or the higher capacity roadways, those higher intensity commercials needed to be located on. That was done by policy, not by colors on the map. So we gave Osceola County staff the idea, well, why not have residential based on the roadway network? Why have all those multiple colors, which tends to confuse everyone, even us in the professional side of this? Well, that started a discussion, but then in 2004, excuse me, we submitted a DRI. That was for Edgewater, 7,000 units. Then a month or so later, we submitted another DRI to Osceola County, which was Mariners Cove. Well, that's now known as Toho. It was another 2,300 units. Just about the same time, Mariners Landing was submitted as a DRI, another 2,300 units. That's currently known as Kindred. Then we submitted a fourth DRI, Green Island, which was 11,000 dwelling units. And then Bellaterra came in, and although the statutes changed, it was no longer a DRI, it was a development of community impact. That was another 1,500 units. And then Friars Cove, now known as Fontana, came in with 1,800 units. Altogether, there was 6 active applications with nearly 26,000 residential units and over 4 million square feet of commercial. Now, you all sitting at the podium, just imagine what the county commissioners were looking at back then. That many units, it was sticker shock. It really was. Never had Osceola County experienced that in such a short time frame. Well, what did they do? In conjunction with the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council, they hired the Urban Land Institute to come in and do a study of their growth management strategies. Now, the Urban Land Institute is made up of professionals from all over the country, from every possible discipline you can imagine that's involved in development. Everything from engineering, planning, environmental, marketing, just financial feasibility, traffic professionals. And they travel around the country and they do these studies for local governments. And I did provide that 72-page document to staff and asked them to disseminate it to you council members and the mayor, and that you can review at your own leisure, but we'll take the next 6 or 7 hours and go through that document here. Okay, I'm kidding.
That's a joke, right?
Yes, that's a joke. Review it at your own leisure. There's an awful lot of good information in there. I am going to try to highlight some of the key points that was made. First of all, the market potential was looked at for growth in Central Florida. At the time, we were the 3rd fastest growing region in the United States. They projected a 2.5% annual growth rate when the national growth rate was at 1%. That was the low projection. We're realizing numbers that are twice that much. They also projected 100% population growth by mid-century. This is from 2003 to 2050. We're in 2022, and we're nearly have doubled our population from 2003 already. There was a demand back then for 35,000 homes per year to meet that population demand. And they analyzed that they had at the time a 3 to 4 year supply. And when you think about what it takes to go through a zoning application, preliminary subdivision application, potentially a land use amendment and annexation, and then go through all your engineering construction plans and get all your permitting from the different agencies, you're 1.5 years to 2 years into a process before you even start site work. Then you got another 6 to 9 months. Then you could start your vertical. So a 3 to 4 year supply was a deficit back then, and it still is. You really need to have a larger housing supply out there to accommodate especially this growth rate. They identified the supply was challenged to meet the demand, and Osceola County was projected to capture double its historic rate. At the time, Osceola County in the Central Florida market had about 18% of the Central Florida market share. Right now, we're over 30%. The reason for that is Seminole County is essentially built out. Orange County is nearing build out. They have lands over on the east side, but they've got the Econoloxahatchee River. I always mispronounce that. And there are environmental constraints over there. Lake County, besides the green swamp, they have some infrastructure issues with water and sewer. Polk, the same thing. So it was projected that more people would be coming to Osceola County, and they projected doubling that 13% market share. We've actually tripled it, nearly tripled it. So, some of the key points was planning for success. They identified the choice to remain rural is not an option. This was their recommendation. And I'll show you why as I go through this. But they also identified by focusing on where you will urbanize, you will also determine what will remain rural. Another key was you had to create, as a community, a vision for growth. Periods of dynamic growth are frustrating. You all experience that just probably every Thursday night, okay? Good planning minimizes the problems. And when we say good planning, everyone is talking about the long-range plan. Knowledge of the end product does help. What's the single greatest obstacle to growth management? Everybody knows that answer. Transportation. That is the single greatest obstacle. The quality of commerce and lifestyle both depend on an adequate transportation system. Upgrading the existing roads was needed back in 2003. It's needed today. It'll be needed 10 years from now. You always are going to have to upgrade existing roads as well as construct new facilities. Planning for future roadways. Integration of transit. We have a very limited links mass transit here. And if we don't, or if we have the same limited links transit system in 20 years, it's really going to be a problem. We need to integrate transit. We need to create those incentives for transit. But also pathways, bikeways, and trails were identified as helping for that quality of life. Additional infrastructure that was discussed by the ULI, of course, utility extensions. You all are very familiar with that issue. Municipal services, police, fire, post office. Education in schools. Education in schools are every bit as important to the infrastructure of a development as a road is. If my clients build a house and try to sell it, and if the buyer's kids don't have a place to go to school, they don't buy the house, my client doesn't build the house, my clients don't hire me, okay? So absolutely, education in schools needs to be addressed. Of course, affordability is a big issue on any market. Parks and recreation are a big issue. Programs and incentives were identified that can help manage these infrastructure elements. They suggested, the Urban Growth, or the Urban Land Institute suggested to think strategically, have the private sector mindset. Regulatory practices that move you forward. Responding to trends, responding to market trends. Define your goals, but have flexible options so you can adjust accordingly to respond to those trends. Meeting market demands, obviously that's the goal, and that is really what's mandated by state law. It's the state that requires these ear-based amendments. It's the state that requires that you plan for this population projection. Partnering in good times and in bad. We've had some bad times. Just a few years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, the housing market was pretty much destroyed. I remember going to Board of County Commissioners meeting where they would have presentations similar to this, and Wawa would come in and give a presentation about how they were wonderful because they were creating 50 part-time jobs. I love Wawa. There's nothing wrong with 50 part-time jobs. But that was the only thing going on. There was nothing else happening. So there are going to be bad times as this growth progresses. Think regionally, but act locally. I think that's self-explanatory. Create a sense of place in a tourism-driven economy. We have been a tourism-driven economy way too long, and we need other industries to help us manage growth and create that lifestyle that we're all looking for. Finally, an open for business attitude. These are all the recommendations from the ULI. Planning, preparation, and patience. Have a vision and stick to it. There is nothing more devastating to a growth management strategy than to adopt policies but then compromise and not enforce the rules that are in place. If you want to change the rules, there's a process to do that. Again, you all are the policymakers, not me. Plan to make it happen. Again, adopt your rules, adopt your codes to implement your policies. Develop a proactive manner. Stay the course with flexibility. Again, don't compromise the long-range vision. Stay the course. There is no overnight success stories. I mentioned the downturn in the housing market a few years back. Edgewater was submitted in 2004. It was approved in 2008. The comprehensive plan was adopted in 2010. That was 12 years ago. We are just now seeing development occurring in Edgewater. Make yes easy for the right proposal. Be willing to say no for the wrong proposal, but most importantly, know the difference. That's why you hire a professional staff to give reviews and recommendations. They need to identify what is accomplishing your policies that you adopt, and they need to identify what is not necessarily accomplishing those and identify that to you in a recommendation. Guiding principles were discussed. Celebrate the environment. We have wonderful natural resources here in Central Florida. Encourage economic development. Promote opportunities for public interaction. Public hearings, community workshops such as this. Osceola County did it with the Narcoossee community. It took 1.5 years to have workshops with stakeholders and work through and created and adopted a Narcoossee community overlay, which you all through your JPA have carried over. Allow flexibility for the long term. Risk greatness. Finally, I want to give you one quote out of that Urban Land Institute. Even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there. Will Rogers. So the county was contemplating going to this urban growth form, but the Urban Land Institute challenged the county to keep it moving forward, not sitting on the track. So let's get into 3 years later. I don't know how long I took, but I only went through 3 years. In June, the county transmitted their ear-based amendment, evaluation appraisal report that they initiated in 2003. At the time, there was a DCA, and the secretary at the time was Thaddeus Cohen, and he said, oh, my God, there's too much density here. Well, then there was an election and a new DCA secretary, and it was Tom Pelham, who is pretty much known as the author of concurrency laws, and he shifted 180 degrees from all the negotiations and said, oh, you got too much density? No. Prove you can achieve that density, Osceola County. December 2008, Osceola County finally adopted an ear-based amendment, and they created, for the first time ever in the state, geographically, an urban growth boundary. Now, it took them another 2 years to get through the settlement, but they were praised for creating that. There were other urban growth boundaries that were based on service boundary and things like that, but Osceola County was the first jurisdiction in the state to actually create, by geometry, an urban growth boundary with all the policies that govern it. Okay, so now what? Now what do they do? Well, remember all those colors on the map? For residential, there's big blobs of blue now. They're called mixed-use districts, but now they have to adopt conceptual master plans because that was part of their growth management policies. So, with workshops with stakeholders and the public, the county adopted 3 conceptual master plans in 2010. It was the East Toho, the South Toho, and the Northeast District conceptual master plans. Then they had to write a zoning ordinance or a land development code to implement all those policies. Remember the 2003 comprehensive plan with all those different colors on it. This is the current comprehensive plan. It's much more simplified. And those big blue areas come with about 20 pages, or about 30 pages of policies and 4 different chapters with elements of land development code to implement those policies. This was the east of Lake Toho conceptual master plan. Up at the top is Kindred and Toho along Neptune Road. Edgewater is, to the east and west, right around Goblet's Cove. And then you have Fontana down at the southeast corner. You have the Whaley Platte property and Bella Terra in between there. South Lake Toho conceptual master plan, the Kelly Ranch, the Bronson Ranch, and Green Island. The Northeast District was up at the northeast end of the county. You notice this is a much more linear plan because they had a different wetland configuration, but they still made these mixed-use districts work, even with those environmental constraints, but they did recognize the environment and protect the environment. Now, remember that sticker shock we were talking about where there was 26,000 units, approximately 4 million square feet? After the adoption of these plans, East Toho was 30,000 and 10 million square feet, 40,000 and 16 million square feet, another 30,000, another 10.5 million square feet with the conceptual master plan. So 26,000 residential units and 4 million square feet of non-residential support turned into over 100,000 dwelling units and 37 million square feet of non-residential. Not all of it's built, not even close. It's just getting started. Remember, there's no overnight success stories. It takes a while for the development to occur, the infrastructure to be put in place to accommodate that. But these are the entitled through land use thresholds that Osceola County has adopted. This was the East Toho conceptual master plan. This is what it looks like today. Up at the north end, now I want to go back just 1 second, or one frame. If you look sort of in the center, and I have no way to point out, unless I got a, do I have a pointer? Equipment superior to operator for me. Okay. Okay. If you look sort of in the center of the image, there's a big red blob. That's called an urban center. Well, the current plan in the center of the image in the same place doesn't have that big red blob there. It moved up to here. Why and how did that move? Well, Kissimmee Park Road interchange is moving up to New Nolte Road. So the urban center, that flexibility that I talked about and the Urban Land Institute talked about, the urban center moved with it because the roadway network of that turnpike interchange is important to support that urban center. That's the kind of flexibility that the policies and the ordinance allow. That's the kind of flexibility that is needed to be able to react to those things. But you'll notice that the balance of the property pretty much, has the same configuration. There's more refined wetlands than there was in 2003, because the information was based on just general public information. And now, as you move through the process, you get more refined site inventory. The 2040 Comprehensive Plan, and we talked about before, if you determine where you're going to develop, you can determine areas to remain rural. 62% of Osceola County is still rural. And that's even after the northeast sector did a sector plan and expanded all the way out to the county line. It used to be 72%, but now it's down another 10% of an urban growth boundary expansion. Again, there's flexibility to be able to react. Now that northeast or north ranch sector plan, there's a 2060 and a 2080 projected plan in those policies. The urban growth boundary has a minimum of 3 dwelling units per acre, and the mixed-use districts have a minimum of 5 dwelling units per acre. The entire reason to increase density is to create a tax base to be able to afford to maintain that infrastructure that goes in to support this growth. I think I spoke in front of the commission on a project that we had, and I'll reiterate, without grants and those type of things, you have one funding source to maintain your infrastructure, to provide those services, and it's called your ad valorem taxes, your existing taxpayers. By increasing density, you are putting in a more efficient infrastructure system because it's a lot closer together, and you're creating new taxpayers, a new tax base. That was the philosophy behind this urban growth. Increase densities to create a higher tax base, more payers. The other big key element is that Osceola County no longer allows any commercial strip centers on highways. They're all in villages. Everything from a neighborhood center, which is a 4 to 5 acre little community center that can house civic, clubhouses, pools, police stations, fire stations, all the way up to a convenience store. Then there's a community center, which is approximately a 20-acre center that is really geared towards a grocery store anchor tenant. And then there's an urban center, which is more like a downtown center. To give you an example, that urban center in Edgewater is approved for, back in the 2010 map, 1.1 million square feet of retail, 1.9 million square feet of office, 850,000 square feet of civic uses, 1,200 residential units, and 800 hotel rooms. But it also comes with a requirement for parks and civic space. It's all mixed in there together in those policies and that ordinance that implements it. So it's more like a downtown than you typically see. Parking, it's not going to be the big grocery stores with the parking out front, a sea of parking out front. Parking is in the side, in the rear. That's all done by ordinance. Of course, there's flexibility to allow for site inventory analysis, to allow for security, and to allow for jurisdictional weapons. We gave a presentation Monday night to the County Commission, and I promise this is my last 3 slides, okay? But I thought it might be important for you all to actually see something in real time, okay? I mean, this was real. This was done Monday night. I didn't present this information to the County Commission. We did get this approved. This is a preliminary subdivision for Lake Gentry landings. It's down off Canoe Creek Road. The east side of the property is Lake Gentry. But I just want to point out just some of the things that we've done on this property, because we got this concept plan approved back in 2014, met with the neighbors. There was actually a road that went, a framework road that went right through the middle of this on the adopted county maps. We agreed with the neighbors to relocate that road to the north so that we could create a buffer with the, what we anticipate, undeveloped northern 2 lanes of a 4-lane divided highway until there's new development to the north. We also are not permitted by ordinance to put in buffers. And there's a good reason for that. They tore a wall down in Berlin, and we're building them here for too many years. But there are communities, and a lot of them, even on Pleasant Hill Road in Osceola County. And up in Orlando, the same thing, Orange County, where you have 2 back-to-back neighborhoods. Well, the kids go to the same school. It's got a wall between them. Well, to visit from one house to the next, they either have to crawl over the wall or they have to get in their parents' car and drive miles all the way through their subdivision and all the way back in the other. The interaction, the interconnectivity, the pedestrian, the bicycle provisions is all an important part to that lifestyle. There's been too many buffers built. It doesn't fit the urban form. So we ended up putting a park along the lakefront, just like you have downtown, just like Kissimmee has downtown. And we reconfigured our lots in the north end to have side lots and created a linear park all along that road. We also created a linear park all along Sullivan Drive. Now, we have some neighbors, and that linear park, by the way, also has trails through it and, you know, park benches and those type of things. And we made commitments for certain planning requirements, which were extraordinary. But we did that to be a good neighbor. This particular community, though, also has a boat lift into Lake Gentry. All these lots internal have the opportunity to put a boat dock in their backyard. And then we created a boat basin for those folks that don't have the privilege of living on the lake. They can still own a boat and have access to the Lake Gentry chain. The reason why we did that was to actually create the value. To give you an example, Bella Lago, if you're familiar with that, off of Pleasant Hill Road, back in their boom day, they were the #1 residential subdivision in the United States of America. And they were getting $150,000 premiums on their lots that had boat access. It's not the cost of the house and the lot, it was on top of the cost of the house and the lot. These are very successful to create value and that community value. But what I wanted to point out, our neighbors to the north. We did a study 1,000 feet to the north. There are some very nice homes, very nice homes. Not all of them, some of them are more established, but there are some very nice newer homes that were built. There's one gentleman that just built a $970,000 house, almost $1 million. It's on an 18-acre lot, and that's over here. But there's other homes that, you know, $450,000, $500,000. But that $970,000 lot is assessed for tax purposes at $770,000. They're on well and septic. They're not on paved roads, curb and gutter. All that increases value with this urban form. There were 5 vacant lots. They are assessed at $450,000, about $20,000 an acre. Taking those vacant lots out and looking at the 27 developed lots, even with those nice homes, they're generating an assessed value of over $5 million or $45,000 per acre. We proposed 719 units. I'm sorry that overlapped a little bit on 248.3 acres. Mixed-use development, minimum of 5 dwelling units per acre, maximum of 25. Our proposed density is at 6 on this particular project. That's towards the lower end. And even with the boating community and that value it's going to create, just applying an extraordinarily conservative assessed value at $250,000 per unit, that project will generate over $23,000 per acre, which is a almost 1,600% increase. Now, I know someone's going to say, well, your 719 units need a whole lot more public services than 27 units. No, they don't, because that's not the right question. The right question to ask is, as long as people keep moving to Central Florida, we need these 719 units. We need a whole heck of a lot more. So they have to be built somewhere. So the real question is, do you want to do it in an urban form, creating value, recognizing community assets, natural assets, and develop at 6 dwelling units per acre and increase your tax base by 1,600% per acre? Or do you want to keep developing at 0.23 dwelling units per acre and spread those 719 units out over 3,000 acres? The units are needed. Services have to be provided to those units somewhere. This is the perfect example of why the urban form was created, why the county adopted it. Just imagine spreading out the services over 3,000 acres, your water lines, your sewer lines, your roads. Imagine the cost of maintaining. Just think about the school buses and all the extra miles of trips they would have. I wanted to show you this, just an example. I'm not picking on any property owners or anything else. I'm just showing you these are the real numbers in real time. I appreciate your time. I know I went through rather quickly. I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Well, it's kind of like sitting here drinking from a fire hydrant. But I think it's something we certainly need to work to get a better understanding of and a grip of, growth and growth that pays for itself. And I know the density thing is a very significant issue. Do we have any questions from council? Mr. Trace, Councilmember Trace.
Hi, John. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good.
How are you?
Good. Okay, so a couple things, and I'm going to be all over the place because I didn't have your presentation in front of me. On the roads, I agree, connectivity, very important. We need to make sure we have that connectivity, but then also some of the street hierarchy, figuring that out. And I know the framework streets help with that, but the biggest thing for me is, especially in this area, we live and die by the turnpike right there. And right now it's a constraint, even without the 100,000 units, I think you said, in those couple mixed-use districts. How do we make sure that that stays ahead of what we're getting? Because West Orange had 429 before everything happened. East Orange had 417 before everything happened. It seems like we're playing catch-up all the time.
Okay. Well, Councilmember Trace, short of getting a few more seats on the Central Florida Expressway Authority, which may not be possible, right now we're so dependent on the turnpike because people, for the most part, and this is a generalization, they don't have the industry to work here. They don't have jobs here. These mixed-use districts with that 1 million square feet and 1.9 million square feet of office, it's all about a jobs to housing balance. It's all about more internal capture, so you don't have to drive out of the area to go to work. These mixed-use districts and the policies and the ordinance were all designed to eventually achieve a balance of live, work, play, and pray in your community, plus the variety of product that's required by ordinance and policy. Right? Fresh out of school, you can rent your first apartment or rent your first house. You can buy your first house because that variety of product is right there in the same community. You can, as your family gets bigger, you can move up to a bigger house. And then when you get old like me and want to retire and don't want to cut grass anymore, you can move into a maintenance-free unit, a townhome, or something like that. You can live your whole life in these communities. It's not mandated, of course, that would be unconstitutional, but the opportunities are provided for that. That is the whole notion behind all of these rules. Now, as far as the interconnectivity, I think you all here in St. Cloud are lucky. You have a grid network. You have connectivity in your downtowns. You need to manage that as you implement your JPA and annex the properties and implement those same rules which you have adopted that Osceola County has. Of course, we have constraints. This is not Indiana. We can't just go mow down a bunch of cornfields and build a road every quarter mile. We have wetlands. We have Lake Toho. You have East Lake Toho. We have those constraints, so we have to have flexibility to work around those constraints, but still implement the overall policy. A big issue is creating new industry. Osceola County has initiated that through Neo City, creating a whole new high-tech industry hub, okay, which is a heck of a lot shorter to drive from St. Cloud to Neo City than it is out to Disney. All right, so growth in jobs is all part of that lifestyle and economic development, which will help relieve some of the roads. But again, no overnight success stories.
Agreed. So on your live, work, play, pray, I think we got the live part figured out. They're coming, right?
Yes.
Varying density is good because everyone has different stages in life, socioeconomic, everything. They want to live in different housing. I think we got that figured out. The work part, going through and looking at the master plans for Kindred and Toho and Edgewater, Kindred had a big, I don't think it was an urban core, community center or whatever you want to call it for non-residential uses. It was a pretty big section of red on the map, and I think it's gotten diluted down now to non-residential of like 13 or 15 acres. Same goes with Toho, like 90 acres whittled down to probably 10 acres of 15 acres of non-residential. Edgewater has the urban center of 90 acres with 3 million square feet of non-residential. How do we make sure that the non-residential actually gets developed at an intensity that makes sense? Because once the final crop is built, the house, like you can't make it anything else.
How do you make sure? You maintain the entitlements, and you may not want to hear this, but you need to allow the developer to build the rooftops to get the population in to support that retail. I can give you a couple examples where other jurisdictions have managed it a little bit differently. Baldwin Park, for instance, up in Orlando. Orange County actually mandated, that a certain amount of commercial would be built at a certain threshold of residential units. Developer did it. And yes, they had people moving in. Well, guess what? Those people that moved in, the commercial, non-residential, they started boarding up the windows. There wasn't enough people there to support it.
Even with downtown Orlando surrounding it.
Even with downtown Orlando surrounding it, exactly. Publix, I tell you, I've been talking to folks in other developments of mine. It's not a matter of public record, so I can't disclose where. But they've been wanting a Publix out there for 20 years. Publix won't move in until they start counting rooftops. Once it makes business sense, Publix will move in, and Publix is no different than any other commercial entity. You can't mandate a market as much as it would be convenient to do so. It can't be mandated. So you have to allow the growth, you have to allow the population base, which is going to support that jobs to housing balance, but you also must stay the course and mandate those place types without allowing a developer to come in and compromise those place types, so that when it is ready for the market to support, it's available to be constructed.
And that's my worry, is that the red area becomes multifamily and you get a lot of now density and need for those services, but they took up the area that was going to be the non-residential.
Well, Councilmember Trace, your comprehensive plan policies, which are identical to Osceola County, and your land development code would not allow that without an alternate conceptual master plan to be submitted. You can make adjustments like moving the urban center, but you have to maintain the urban center. That was moved in Edgewater because of the turnpike moving. But to submit an alternate conceptual master plan, you can't eliminate place types. You can reconfigure them, but you have to maintain the same thresholds. You can also adjust your densities somewhat, as long as it's still supported by the non-residential support you're approved for. But to make those type of changes, you have to go through an alternate conceptual master plan, which requires a comprehensive plan amendment. Comprehensive plan amendment is submitted, reviewed by your staff, recommended for approval or denial, goes to your planning and zoning board, comes here for transmittal, if it's large scale, more than 50 acres. Then it goes to the state. Now, the state, after praising the county and the city for adopting these same rules, even though it's not a DCA anymore and they don't quite have the central planning authority that they used to have, I cannot envision the Department of Economic Opportunity not objecting to the elimination of this jobs to housing balance, because that's the whole function. That's the whole purpose behind these growth management laws. But even if they did recommend it, it still has to come back here for a final adoption, a final approval. So not only will you just see it once, you'll see it twice. So you have two opportunities to say no, if it doesn't make sense. Remember, make yes easy for the right proposal, be willing to say no, and know the difference. That's the kind of things where if you know the difference, be willing to say no. That's my opinion.
I just think some of the flexibility is going to get us in a situation where it's already built out by the time you have the need for it.
And that's very possible. Okay, it all depends on market trends and what happens, but it's still going to be there. Again, you cannot eliminate a place type. You cannot diminish the thresholds significantly without compromising the entire plan. Now, again, I don't establish policies. I'm just telling you what the story is and why this all came about. If you all want to say, we don't want mixed use, we don't want these high densities, we want St. Cloud to be the same as what it was 20 years ago, that's your decision, not mine. I don't care what the rules are, I just need to know what they are so I can play by them. I don't want to be 4th and goal from the 1 yard line and the referee come in and say, oh, we're changing the rules, you only get 3 downs, and take the ball away from me, okay? But I think there's sound philosophy behind this urban form, this urban growth. And I will say that you all can make your policy decisions, but you already have. You've already determined that by adopting these policies, this ordinance. I would suggest, though, if you do want to compromise that, which is your right to do, or at least 3 votes, it's your right to do, you're welcome to do that. But I would certainly suggest that you take a hard look at your JPA and not compromise Osceola County's opportunity to implement their rules when you annex properties.
Understood. So, and your belief is that the Edgewater Urban Center can be built at that intensity that was presented?
Yes.
Okay. 'Cause I
Not
see
next
the-
year,
Yeah,
not
understood.
in 2 years, but 20 years from now, absolutely.
Because in your map it had a PS number, so I imagine you guys are getting going on.
There's already,
Something.
some of the initial phases have SDP approvals.
Okay. So that's live, work, play. On the park side of things, and this is one of the big differences in my mind between the way the city and the county treat things, and parks is really the biggest thing. We do more active parks versus county does more passive parks, and that's just the way kind of things work out. How are we planning on making sure that there are enough opportunities for active type parks within these master plans?
Well, the county and/or the city Parks and Recreation Department can come in and purchase anything they want for a community or regional park. But the policies are established where there is an open space place type. It's not adopted on the conceptual master plan by area, but it is adopted conceptually that you're going to have open space. But every place type, a neighborhood 1, which is a predominance of detached product, a neighborhood 2, which is a predominance of attached product, a neighborhood center, a community center, an urban center, they all have a percentage of that area which requires public civic park space. And although recently we've gone through a little bit of a learning curve with the county's planning departments, it is implemented through ordinance. Okay, so there are park spaces in every place type. And then, of course, in the case of East and South Lake, there's the Lake Toho Protection Area, which is a huge regional park system. I can tell you back in 2004, it was rather difficult for me to convince, or for us to convince our clients that, no, you can't have lakefront lots. We're creating a community park for everybody to come visit. It's public, okay? Yes, it's more passive, but those environmentally sensitive areas are also recognized through the adoption of those conceptual master plans and through the ordinance policies that implement them.
Okay, so it's live, work, play, pray. I pray this happens in a great fashion.
Well, I've got some clients that pray about it every day. Okay.
Well, I think learn is the next step of, you mentioned schools, but
Yes.
there's that other facet of it after primary school. It's making sure that we have a holdout for a Valencia campus. They're usually early enough to buy property that they kind of set things up early, but I want there to be a Valencia campus out there, a trade schools, other opportunities out there for education, and not just, because we have to hold up a elementary, middle, and high school site for areas. Next thing, and I don't know if this is something that is possible given the where we're at in the entitlement process for all of this, but Horizon West has adequate public facilities as part of any plan. There's a certain percentage of land that has to be held back for adequate public facilities. Mm-hmm. And with that, they did something genius, and I don't know how it's legal, but $22,500 per acre is the value that they give for anything donated through that APF process. Parks, utilities, roads, everything. I mean, everything is kind of helped funded in that fashion, because then the land doesn't have to be bought later on down the road for $1 million an acre by the cities and counties. Is that something that can happen?
Absolutely. Absolutely, that's something that can happen. Unfortunately, when we bring projects through the process, those things aren't identified early on. So, okay, we know elementary schools, by policy, need to be associated with a neighborhood center. Middle schools need to be associated with a community center. High schools need to be associated with an urban center. That's by policy. But the school board of Osceola County is an independent service provider. They don't necessarily, in my opinion, follow the policies that are adopted always. They try to cooperate. Now, as far as police stations, fire stations, they're civic uses. Remember I told you that the centers all have a certain percentage that are required to be civic? You all want to build a fire station in Edgewater when they annex their first phase, which is ED4, Edgewater Neighborhood 4? We have neighborhood centers. They can be there. If you identify it up front, then yes, it would be cheaper than after a developer spends all the money to put infrastructure in the ground and increases the value of the property. However, I would just caution you that, like the school board, they can only keep surplus land for a certain amount of time. I remember years ago when we did Rumington, there was a school site out there. They were moving so fast through the phasing process, we went to the school board and said, hey, this is a reserved school site. Do you want it or not? And back at the time, it was appraised at $65,000 an acre. Well, we don't have that kind of money. Okay, my client will donate you this school site, free, if you build a school there, so he can use it for his marketing. Well, they couldn't commit to that. Turned out, it ended up, they were reaching their time to carry surplus lands, and it ended up being a charter school built, and then another elementary school got built. So it's got to be a partnership, because my client, the developers, need services, and they are willing to cooperate. But it does have to be a partnership. It can't be an extraction, because that doesn't create a very amenable public-private partnership. Identify those things early on, sure. But then actually follow through and build them so my client can work it into his marketing program, which helps him.
Yeah, and we're just trying to provide the best level of
Yes.
service that we can with the resources that we're given, right? Because you said
Absolutely.
the only resource we have, ad valorem, right? So,
Yep.
and the upfront part, like, so you mentioned it's kind of difficult to do all that upfront unless told where it goes, but we don't really dictate if it's just a blue color on the map and it's mixed use. We don't really dictate what that looks like.
Well,
Once
to
the
an
conceptual
extent
master
you
plan
do.
comes in.
Well, to an extent you do, because you have those policies that civic spaces, fire station, for instance, that's a civic use. It is located in a neighborhood center or a community center or an urban center. And if you identify specifically where you want it, we'll go ahead and design a neighborhood center or whatever center to incorporate that need. So even with the big blue blobs that you have right now on the land use plan, you have those comprehensive plan policies that identify those needs of infrastructure. That's why that Urban Land Institute, and I went through a laundry list of other infrastructure elements. It addressed all those, and we have policies and ordinance to implement it. Now, eventually, yes, you need a conceptual master plan to be adopted for mixed-use district, and then a concept plan, and then a preliminary subdivision plan, and then a site development plan. So, you know, there is a cumbersome, but there is a very thorough process to review projects, and we can incorporate them at any time. The sooner, the better.
Thank you. And I
Well,
know,
we as planners. Okay?
I know Chief Miller's been doing a lot with the areas that they have looked at, you know, new fire stations. So I think we're going through that a little bit later. But yeah, they've done good job with interacting with the developers and trying to get the right parcel for that. Kind of rolling back to the beginning of it, beginning of this, connectivity and the turnpike. You had mentioned the interchange for Nolte. How many more interchanges and overpasses will we have as we go south? Because it seems like we're going to have a west of the turnpike and an east of the turnpike situation here.
Right now, what is planned, okay, not budgeted in a capital improvement plan, except for the new one at Nolte. You've got the existing at 244, which is the south exit at, used to be Shady Lane, it's now Crossbury Parkway. You have the northbound exit at 242, which exits right by Outback right there. Then you have New Nolte. There is another turnpike interchange planned for the Green Island development, and that does too have an urban center on the adopted conceptual master plan. And of course, subject to the Expressway Authority, you have Southport, and they're looking to do a system-to-system down there at the southern end of Green Island on the Bronson property. So that will be essentially 4 turnpike interchanges along 11 miles of road.
And then we'll have 1 or 2 overpasses in between each of those.
Right now, the county has approved a framework road to go over the turnpike about in the middle of Green Island, south of the existing Kissimmee Park Road. Kissimmee Park Road Although will not be a turnpike interchange, it will remain as an overpass to connect to Canoe Creek. Friars Cove Road, there is an existing crossing that will need to be improved. Right now, it's a, 2-lane unimproved road. And I believe there's another one planned by the county on their thoroughfare plan down in the Green Island, Bronson Ranch, somewhere between the two interchanges.
And when you say, so there's planned, funded, and constructed, right? So
Yes.
planned, great, let's hold back the land for that, but funded, how are we getting some of those funded that aren't revenue generators for the turnpike? Because they're not really going to want to fund anything that's not going to generate revenue.
Well, if you want my opinion on this,
That's why we're here.
okay. How the county is funding some of these, and to their benefit, or to their credit, they are framework roads. The private sector builds framework roads. However, anything over and above the capacity needed for that individual project is then credited with mobility fee credits to that public-private partnership to incentivize, to create those incentives for the private sector. It's also something that I'm sure your attorney will advise you of, something called a rational nexus in state law. If you collect, and this is a very layman's interpretation, if you collect impact fees for an improvement, you can't charge more than what that developer requires. If you do, you have to pay them back with impact fee credits. So you can create those incentives through your mobility fee credits and incentivize the private sector to implement those roads. Did I get that close?
Pretty close.
Okay.
And then, so is it possible to do roadway agreements like Horizon West where it's trips come with segments, come with improvements?
Certainly, absolutely. It's possible to enter into developer's agreement for anything, as long as you are in compliance with state law and your comprehensive plan, which is implementing those roads. It's possible to do that, absolutely, yes. And they could be negotiated, as the county has initiated now, for east, south, and all of mixed-use districts 5 and 6, which is the big blue area in between Canoe Creek Road and Harmony, where they are looking to adopt, they have drafted and they're looking to adopt a conceptual master plan. The county has initiated an overall traffic study, and they have all the commitments of all the developers which are currently entitled in the review process, in the construction process, and future development, committed to living up to their obligations designated in this study. So the county's already initiated that for this area.
And that also includes some of the framework streets that are already existing, Canoe Creek, Old Canoe Creek, Michigan,
Yes, yes, and especially Hickory Tree Road.
Hickory Tree. That was, I didn't get far enough east yet, but yeah. Okay.
But, and I will point out, if you take a look at Edgewater, the construction, one of the first things they're doing along with their first phase is they're actually building Cross Prairie Parkway, initially up front.
All the way, that little
Well,
stick
not
over
all
the
way,
canal?
Okay,
All the-
you all have control of the little triangle piece.
You can have it.
Well, you have control, you have jurisdiction over it. It's owned by D.R. Horton, I believe. So it's under private ownership. And you have control of Toho, that's one of your projects. Cross Prairie Parkway stops at the C-31 canal. There is that triangle piece, which is not part of the mixed-use districts adopted by the county, but you have control over establishing policy for that. And then it will stop at the north property line of Edgewater, but right now it's being constructed for the first phase of Edgewater, which is south of Clay Whaley Road, south and east of Clay Whaley Road. So it's being constructed from Kissimmee Park Road overpass right now, all the way down south of your water plant on Kissimmee Park Road.
Okay.
And that's just the initial phase of construction.
Councilmember Askew.
John, appreciate you coming in. This is your expertise at some of this stuff. I mean, I wish you'd
not take 5 vacant lots and did it more on 4 vacant lots and 8 vacant lots. Councilman Trace was kind of hinting on, one of our challenges, we got 93% of our citizens head out of St. Cloud every day, Monday through Friday, even on Saturdays, they're going to Disney, they're going to Orlando. The challenge I think we're having as a city and our growth is that, this is all nice and good, but the reality part is Old Canoe Creek Road, all those roads, they're just stuffed with people. And one of our largest complaints here in the city is that, one of those reasons. So when you bring something in front of us, I mean, we have to choke it and go, okay, yeah, I mean, you met all the guidelines of it, but what's happening is our roads are just getting plugged up. And as council, I mean, sometimes we have to look at something, and I know state law states even though the road is, as long as it's not failing, I still got to approve the units that are going in. So we try our best, but I really wish you as a planner and the county and stuff would come together better and go, you know what, we're all paying into this. We all want to live here and play and pray, but we also want to get there too. So part of our challenge is stand on any one of those major roads in the morning and at night, and nobody's moving anywhere. And all we're doing is, you just gave me a perfect example. You're going to plan on a Lake Gentry Road. We're not going to have those units to get them onto the turnpike in time. This is going to get approved. You're just going to get more of a choke into the city of St. Cloud and probably Osceola County. So I'm not complaining. I'm just more of like, we continue to do this. We know it's going to happen, but we continue with the growth part. I really wish there was some way, not to like throw it at the developer, but work it with the developer and go, you know what, let's increase the capacity of this road, Old Canoe Creek Road, Narcoossee, Neptune. I mean, I can just go on. I know Neptune's getting its facelift here coming up, but finally, yeah. And when we worked it out with the Turnpike Authority to do it all at the same time, I think with your help and the county's help. But I really wish the two entities would work closer together, and there wasn't more of like butting heads where they go, okay, this is being put in. John's putting a project in here. We think it looks great. Let's address the roads before we do it. And I know it's not the developer's challenge. It ends up being our challenge. I mean, how would you, as an expert at this sort of thing, how would you address something like that?
Well, I appreciate the compliment, but I am not an expert in transportation engineering, but I will tell you exactly what the county has initiated. It's very similar to the Horizon West overall traffic study. The results of that will be not just what improvements are needed, but what improvements are needed and when they are needed, including improvements to existing roadway networks and assignment of obligation. I don't know how it's going to work ultimately. I don't know if it's going to be per dwelling unit. I just don't know. Or per development. I don't know that yet. That's being the result of this study that was initiated by Osceola County. They're the type of things that I believe are needed because it provides certainty for my clients, okay? And certainly it's more comforting for those of you that are responsible for making decisions on development to know that there is a plan in place. The difficult part is to educate folks enough to try to get them to understand you can't build the roads first. Who's going to pay for it? You need approved development to go out and bond money, to go out and, initiate a market, to go out and start initiating funding. If you want to build the road first, that's what we had prior to the 2003. That's what we had, and it was called concurrency.
Right.
Well, what happened with concurrency is developers would move out to areas where they could actually achieve concurrency at an affordable price. And then they keep moving and moving and moving. That created urban sprawl. Now you're spreading things out again, okay? And if you want to do that, you might as well go back to suburban development and make everybody happy, okay? But 30, 40, 50 years from now, you're going to be looking at development from Disney World to Yeehaw Junction.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and that simply is not affordable with our current tax base, even with the new taxpayers, with the current tax rates. It's just not affordable. Okay, so the county's already initiating a huge study for the mixed-use District 5 and 6. I would suggest the city could do something very similar to the Horizon West model. The county entered into a developer's agreement with Tavistock up in the Northeast District. I don't know how familiar you are with that, Councilmember Matheny, okay, but they have a developer's agreement for the extension of Osceola Parkway, okay, and some other roadway improvements, where the county has pledged a certain percentage of funds, and the developer has pledged a certain percentage of funds. I'm going to have Sean Hingle from Hanson Walter help on that one, because he's got a comma behind his name.
Hey, Councilman Askew, the, under the Sunbridge model, which.
Could you state your name?
Excuse me,
For
Sean
the record.
Hindle, Hanson Walter and Associates. Under the Sunbridge model, the county created a model with Tavistock, and they created a transportation model. So they studied the entire region that would be impacted by that model, by that development. It initiated $600 million worth of road improvements. So then they established a tax increment financing for increased values of land. Tavistock's proportionate share is $300 million, and then the county is going to initiate the other $300 million through the tax revenue they gain for a certain period of time from that development. So they're going to create $600 million of revenue to build those roads as they're needed or ahead of time. So a lot of them are going to be 417 extension, Osceola Parkway extension, those types of roadways will be more of the county. And then all of the local larger roads on-site and immediately off-site, Narcoossee Road, Cyrils Boulevard, those types of roads will be done by Tavistock. They're doing the same model for the area that's south of St. Cloud. So everything from 192 Hickory Tree, mixed use 5 and 6, all the way around to South Lake Toho and East Lake Toho, which is the Edgewater, Kindred, Bellaterra, Fontana, Green Island, Southside. All those developments are entering right now into an agreement to agree. The county has already initiated the traffic study. It should be ready in about 3 months. So they've already hired the consultant, and he's already in process. And what they're going to do is they're going to create a global model of what the transportation needs will be for these projects. Then they're going to define proportionate shares for the projects, and then a funding source, most likely tax increment financing, to fund the roadways so they can be built as they're needed. So that gives them money ahead of the developments. Mobility fee credits or mobility fees that they need for the county to fund that, they'll have it as the land values increase. The land values increase when we put a construction plan set together. When that SDP is approved, that land value for the property appraisers, we plat that property, those lots are all there, that land value goes up. You add the houses, it goes up more. And that tax base that they start with, anything above that tax base will be the increment financing that's available to them to use for these types of improvements. So they're taking a global look at it, they're creating a new funding source, and then they're working with the developers and making them enter into the same type of development that Tavistock and the county entered into. The big challenge is we have 40 different developers south of St. Cloud. Sunbridge has one. So it's pretty easy to control. So what they've done is the attorneys for the county developed what's called an agreement to agree. That is the first step. So everyone that is involved in that was given that agreement, and almost everybody has signed it. And basically that's saying we're allowing you to charge us additional proportionate shares above and beyond our mobility fees. They want the roadways just as much as everybody else does, because if they don't have them, their projects don't work. One of the things that Councilmember Trace asked about is how do we guarantee that the urban center is going to be built to that form? I can guarantee you it won't. in the initial phases. But when the initial phases, you'll have all ground parking. Okay? Your units will be out by the roadways and you'll have ground parking centralized in between the units. In the final phase, we have 10 parking decks. So that parking will be reinitiated into development, into more high-rise development, because you'll have more density. So that's where your offices and all your higher buildings come in, and we build the parking decks to serve what was already previously built. Then, once those parking decks are built, now you have the additional parking in some of the other developments that had already happened 20 years prior. Those parcels will go into redevelopment, and they'll get more dense. So that's how the urban center works, and that's how you get that density. You don't get it up front, but as we develop over time and the needs become there, that's how they get more dense on it. So it's not going to be any different than Neo City. In Neo City, they'll have surface parking up front. They're going to build parking decks. They're going to get more dense. They're going to build more infrastructure, more employment base. And that's what the urban centers are supposed to do as well.
And my worry with that, sorry to jump in on your part, is if it goes into fractional ownership or gets cut down to lot sizes less than an acre or 5 acres, it just doesn't become possible for that redevelopment aspect of it. So are there deed restrictions, other types of ways to make sure that that doesn't happen?
The approval entitlements maintain the place type and the threshold for the ultimate build-out, regardless of ownership. Now, one of the,
I can't build an eighth of a parking deck with my
No,
3
you
acres.
can't.
I own.
But the
Okay.
parking lots can be owned by an association.
Okay, so then
It
that's,
could be resold out and redeveloped with the higher density.
now you got two engineers battling.
Yes, Mr. Manzares, you have a comment?
Well, I had just two quick comments because of some of the issues that were just discussed. First of all, I think all of the discussion you have today is great, good information, but it all has to be considered and retained within the concept there, or you saw in some of the earlier slides. There are thousands of entitled homes in the project. So everything you're really addressing is really beyond today to address some of these issues. And that's the, as you, 5 of you sit up here know this, you're forced to deal with the entitlements that these projects have, and there's a certain faith in the developer that the developer is going to work with the city or the county to address those and maybe adjust their entitlements for the benefit of the project. That goes back to the second thing in the initiative that the county has put on. We were, Mr. Sturgeon and Mrs. Miller and I were at those meetings, the initial meetings of it, and I'm not going to ask you, John, to offer your legal opinion on this.
Good.
But an agreement to agree is essentially not an agreement. So there's no real agreement in place, and although I think, and Sean is correct, it was easier with the Sunbridge because there's one developer, one motivated developer, one well-funded developer that was able to come in and put those and help with that project. But I wouldn't essentially rely on the fact that that project is going to move forward and there's going to be that kind of result for that model unless there's cooperation and participation and commitment from the developers. And that was the message. And, you know, Deputy County Manager there, she could tell she was there. That was the message that was delivered by the county manager to those folks in that room. We need you to help, and we need you to participate, and we need you to commit. So that's the unknown factor right now.
Right, and that's what I was getting at, Mr. Adams here. I was going to say, his project, can he help and commit to fixing our Canoe Creek Road and Old Canoe Creek Road? I mean,
Well,
I
Here's my
understand he
segue
can't,
for
but
you.
And Councilmember Askew and council members, and to address your attorney's comments, there is a commitment. It's called special conditions of approval that were placed on two projects Monday night, which you have the opportunity to do. It commits those developers to that future traffic study by special condition of approval. So it's part of the approval process, and I will agree, the agreement to agree is, you know, sort of like how do you get a client to sign a blank check, but with those special conditions of approval, the way they were drafted, it actually rides with the project. So even if there's another owner, they're still committed. They would have to go back to a public hearing to get it changed. So by implementing those special conditions through your approval process, you have a lot more of a safeguard. It's just not, you know, somebody like me trying to convince my client to do the right thing. it's someone like a body that you are to say, here's the condition of approval. You shall do this.
Councilmember Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Adams, for your presentation. It's been very helpful today, and I really appreciate Councilmember Trace's questions. And Councilmember Askew kind of took my thought that I really appreciate all this future planning and the urban centers that are to come. Some of these could be 20 to 30 years down the road. It's not particularly helpful for the residents who live in St. Cloud right now, who still have to drive up the turnpike to Orlando if they want to work, play, or pray. Is there a way to better incentivize commercial development to serve the people who live in St. Cloud right now?
There's multiple ways to incentivize. You heard, and by the way, Council, part of being an expert is having associates in the audience that could come in and bail you out when necessary. But you heard Sean Hendel talk about how the county is considering the TIF, the tax incremental funding, which is the increased tax base, anything over and above what's already being, or what should be already being collected from the new properties. That could be used as a bonding tool, that could be used as a funding source to help incentivize the private sector to implement these centers on a much more fast-track basis. Yes, that can be done. I would just only caution you, based on our experience, if you build it too soon, it'll get boarded up. It won't get used. Okay, so there's a fine balance there. I would suggest that you may want to get consultation from a financial advisor, marketing analysis. If you wanted to, it's just a suggestion. Again, I don't make policy, okay? But I've seen that done before in very large projects where we implement marketing studies, financial analysis, financial feasibility studies. And not we, the consultant team does that, okay? But it's just a suggestion, okay? You do have funding sources. TIF is a very valuable tool because it's my understanding that can be bonded.
Right. And just the last question, it might be better for better question for Mr. Hendel, but the traffic studies that go in for these developments, we have sort of an issue now with on Nova Road and 192, where that's a dangerous intersection because of the growth we've experienced on that side. How do we avoid that in the future and better plan ahead so that that doesn't happen with future growth in our city?
I could tell you that your code, the county's code, just about every jurisdiction we work in all over the country requires what's called a traffic impact analysis. For years, for many years, and currently, it's required for every project to measure its impacts. And it goes out and measures intersections and identifies improvements. Your land development code, the county's land development code, is all set up for safety improvements. But with what the county's doing with a bigger study, it's very similar to what the county did with a bigger area to plan. You're talking about 25,000 acres in east and south that are master planned. That can't happen in the private sector because it is piecemealed. And those TIAs are piecemealed through the process. But what the county has initiated with that overall traffic study will really help and benefit in identifying those and assigning responsibility to those improvements.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Councilmember Matheny.
Thank you. Thanks for the history lesson. It was a lot of good information. I
Hope I didn't bore you.
jotted down. No, definitely not. I agree with all of my fellow council members here. I mean, we hear it all the time. I'm sure everybody hears it about the traffic. You sit in the traffic, it's frustrating. And you said it's a much shorter drive to Neo City than to Dizzy. And I'm like, I don't know anymore. Like, depends on which route you have to go. And but I like I didn't know the specifics of the deal that the county was working on up in the Northeast District. Is that in addition to mobility fees, or is it in lieu of?
The county has pledged certain mobility fee credits to help fund that and TIF funding. Okay, so it's all part of the same ordinance, the same developers agreement. I don't know the fine details of that. but
That's
the
okay.
county's
You don't
pledged-
have to.
Yeah,
get
they
into-
still pay their mobility fees, but they do have certain credits assigned based on ordinance.
So the thought I have to my fellow council members is kind of the conversation we have with CRA. You know, the CRA dollars is kind of the same thing, right? The taxable value was set, and then each year we're sprinkling money in there, and hopefully the taxable value increases and we can divert that, but that diverts money from the general fund too. So that is something that, you know, we would have to definitely analyze, and I would imagine if we were to go that route, we would have to get approval from the county too, because the county approved the CRA dollars. But I think, you know, any kind of out-of-the-box thinking we can do to try to help, I'm all for it. And I guess one of my big frustrations is we get a lot of development come in and they say they're mixed use. And it's like, it'll be 700 houses and a Chick-fil-A. I'm like, this isn't mixed use.
Dollar store.
You know, or a dollar store, or a mattress store, or whatever. But it'll be some tiny little amount of commercial, and, you know, like, we were excited, I remember when Toho came in, because we really did think this was gonna, like, live, work, play, this was gonna, like, you know, knock it out of the park, so I'm hoping that the commercial area didn't shrink, like Councilmember Trace was saying, because I don't recall that coming before us, to approve, but, yeah, anything we can do to help educate ourselves, make better decisions, help with traffic, I'm all for it, ideas for funding, I love it. I think that would be challenges with that funding mechanism potentially, but, thank you for all of the information.
Well, Councilmember Matheny, just to kind of summarize, first of all, R.J. Witten Associates were not the consultant on the current Toho plan or the Kindred plan. I understand that, though. I can tell you that we at our office have clients come in, and we will say, no, we're not submitting that. It doesn't comply. You can find somebody else that will submit it, okay? But remember that one guideline, that one, you know, discussion item from the Urban Land Institute. Make yes easy for the right proposal. Be willing to say no. Know the difference, okay? Mixed use is not a bunch of residential units and a Chick-fil-A. In my opinion, it doesn't comply with the comp plan policies and the mixed-use district ordinance, okay? It just doesn't. Now, if that Chick-fil-A was the first phase of a larger commercial center, sure, and it could be justified, and we have done that before, where, you know, we have an initial phase, but we reserve that space for the ultimate mixed-use obligation of the client. So I appreciate the comment. I appreciate how difficult your jobs are on a Thursday evening. I've promised way too many people in the past they'd never have the opportunity to vote against me, so I'm never going to be sitting in your position, okay?
Well, you know, the number one complaint that I hear, and I'm sure everyone here on the council does, is, you know, all the traffic, we want St. Cloud to stay the same. Well, St. Cloud's not going to stay the same. It's just like your kids, you know, it'd be nice if they could stay a certain age, and, or, you know, they're going to grow up, and the city is growing and it's changing. And it's just reminded me also how important it is that we have a good relationship with the county, because if we don't have a good relationship with the county, and that we communicate together, that we work together to help shape what is going to happen in the future. And so I appreciate the good relationship that I believe we've had, and the improvements that I believe between our staff and the county staff. And I think that's something we need to continue to work on, and then try and communicate to the community that, you know, the same people who say we want St. Cloud to stay the same, and then the next voice is, well, when you're going to bring in more commercial, when you're going to bring in a Target, when you're going to bring in more high-end restaurants, like, you know, we have the ability to do that. All we can do is create an environment, and certainly policies and planning that is conducive to that. And so, thank you so much. I think Mr. Sturgeon would like.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I just wanted to put a little clarification on the agreement to agree. Now, that's some jargon or slang we use. It's actually called the Transportation Collaboration Agreement, and it calls for two things. for the developers to cooperate with the study and accept the findings. So I just wanted to clarify that, what that exact intent of that document is. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Adams, thank you so much. You've done an excellent job, and we appreciate your
Well,
presentation and all your staff.
I certainly appreciate this opportunity, and, you know, I could stand here and talk for 2 weeks about this stuff if you want to bring me back, but if you don't, I understand. But seriously, I do very much appreciate this opportunity. If there's ever any questions between any council member or any member of your staff, don't hesitate to contact our office, and although I may not be the expert that I was credited to be, I know where to get the right answers if I don't know them, okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Sean. The next item on our agenda is a presentation of the Metro Forecasting Report.
Good afternoon. That was an excellent presentation, wasn't it? I don't know, my name is David Farmer. I'm the CEO of Metro Forecasting, and we've been working for you all since late last year, doing some modeling, and we can talk about some of the things that have been discussed here previously. And I hope you had a chance to review our draft report. And this presentation is not meant to replace that report, but to support that report. So I will say it's all fair game, though I didn't memorize the report 5 minutes before walking in. But feel free to ask any question, and you feel free to interrupt me any time along the way as well. There we go. So I'm going to give you an update on where we are on the project, talk about some of the deliverables, and then give you some of the results. And at the end, I want to talk a little bit about some legacy issues. So what we have complete now is we've constructed the interactive growth model based on TAZ's, traffic analysis zones. We've combed through all the parcels to identify the housing, commercial retail office, non-residential uses that exist today. We reviewed zoning, future land uses, made some interpretations, talked a lot with your staff. And then did the build-out analysis. That build-out analysis connecting to the baseline results in then a forecast spatially by TAZ for both the city and the zones within the JPA. We did a student, school-age children forecast, and we did a future fire station location and spatial and temporal forecast as well, and we did also utility demand needs. We're still working on the impervious model. I have actually an intern working on collecting some of the data that goes into that model. And then in the short near future, we hope to be running some different scenarios. That's the what if. What if this happened? What if we changed the density or intensity, or we moved this from this location to that location? What would be the end result? Sometimes less than you would think, and sometimes much more than you think. It's very interesting when you start moving these levers and you get unintended events. Anyway, it's a good way to measure policy before it's actually policy. It's testing policy. So one of the deliverables is, of course, the report, which you guys have the draft copy of, and where we've summarized both. Trying to tell a story. Right? So first we have this whole JPA area, and then we wanted to break it down into various areas of the JPA because, just to be honest, the JPA is an enormous area with an enormous amount of potential. And when you talk about big things like that, it can get a little bit scary. So we broke it down into the north, south, east, west, so we can really wrap our arms around it. Besides that, each one of these areas sort of has a different heartbeat and a different potential, right? The eastern area has, there's some mixed use plan there for the future. Trust me, it's not in the near future. It's going to be way out there. Whereas we have the western JPA is much more likely to light up sooner and develop with more intensity. We've already provided one mapping tool based on your baseline data, and we're actively working on one that incorporates our forecast analysis as well, that your planning team can use to access our data and see what it says about a different area or a collective area. And then, of course, we'll be running some scenarios. So this is actually intended more for your staff than you, but I was talking today with Melissa, and I want to learn more about what your planning staff uses for the long-range planning, so that we have so much data, and we don't want to put everything we have on our website, because then it would just be so muddy, it'd be like me throwing a phone book at you, you know? But what are you using now, and what can we provide that we have already on the shelf? Just what order can we put it in so it makes it more accessible, to speed up both review of projects and maybe do a more comprehensive, maybe there might be some tools we can add that aren't readily accessible. I know in another unnamed county, the staff was using our tool and they were analyzing an unnamed gas station, and the consultant said there's 85,000 people on this random shape. Well, there's no way for the county they had to just sort of take the consultant's word for it until I showed them about the tool and said, well, if you just take the tool and select these, just window this area, and it'll tell you the population just like that. Turns out the developer's consultant accidentally overstated the population by 25,000 people. Ultimately, that unnamed unnamed gas station in an unnamed county didn't wind up going through. I say that with no joy. I'm just saying that now they have a tool that they can actually look at what the consultant says or what other people say, and I'm saying it's factual. It's based on real hard data, not just a gross estimation. And then finally, how can the IGM tools be used to save your staff's time? Right? We have a huge investment now. We want to make sure you save time and analyze the projects as best as you can. So let's just talk about the city, right? So we've taken iron walls, and there are stone walls. They're all around the city. The JPA doesn't exist, and so that's all I'm talking about right this moment. So between now and 2040, that's only 18 years from now. Now, when I was 18, that was a long time. At 55, 18's not, it's like tomorrow, right? So you're going to add close to 12,000 housing units with about 32,000 people. Think about that. That's coming in the city. And that a lot of that, I'd say the majority of it, is based on, you've heard the word today, entitlement, existing entitlements that are already in place. Now, by build-out, you're going to have the potential to add, again, without any annexation, about 15,000 units and about 39,000 people based on the demographics that we've analyzed for the various TAZs and such. So most of your growth is going to take place in the next 10 and 20 years. So again, regardless of annexation, now is a very important time to be thinking about legacy planning, and you still have time. You know, the walls are sort of closing in on us, but there's still time to make some plans, make some adjustments to increase and enhance the quality of life, and again, leave that stamp on it that this council was the one that set forth the effort to recognize the fact that build-out's coming for the existing city, and that there's still time to change those things that you want to change, not saying you have to change. And if you don't do it sooner than later, the land will be gone. And, you know, interesting, Mr. Adams used a term, reservation. I love that term. Another term that means the same thing is allocation. And if it's okay, I want to sort of jump back to the last presentation, and Councilmember Trace was asking about these non-residential areas, and they seem to be shrinking. So, and there was a very eloquent answer given about building parking areas and then tearing them down and building parking decks and all that, and that's a wonderful plan. But in the end, what you need to make sure is land is allocated. Our model points to things like Edgewater and says, not only, but I'll show you a picture here in a few minutes, it's not one, it's like 2 fire stations are going to be needed. They're going to need at least a neighborhood shopping center, which is, let's be honest, it's going to easily fit in the 4 million or 3 million square feet that they have planned, because that's only, 150,000. But you need to make sure that land is allocated. The land in Toho was at 90 acres that went away. I think there was 1 million square feet of industrial space that was originally planned for that. And if that's no longer planned there, I'll just say it's a tragedy. It was a real opportunity to have excellent, well-located property, industrial land, right next to the turnpike, which is what industrial needs. They need excellent access. They don't need it in the middle of some farm field. They need to be able to get the freight in and out and do the things that they need. Forgive me for preaching. So let's talk about some of those non-residential needs. So in the city alone, you're going to need 2 additional neighborhood shopping centers. Call it a grocery store. I'm not talking an Aldi's here, though. I'm talking about one that has the associated accessory uses that people need for their essential services. You already need a community shopping center. And I'm using some slightly different terms than Mr. Adams is using and what's used in the comp plan. Some of these are ULI terms. When I think of a community shopping center, it's that thing that's 300,000 to 400,000 square feet. It's destination based. You're usually not driving by Home Depot and going, oh, I think I'll stop and get a 2x4, right? It's those things you plan on the weekends. Okay, I need to get some paint. I need to get some washers. I need to go to the bank. I need to do this, this, and this. That's what makes up a community shopping center. And you're in need of one now. And back to, I can't remember if it was Commissioner Askew or not, whoever asked about commercial, your economic development person is doing an admirable job at attracting the people. Your problem is your story needs to get out. This place is red hot, and I'm happy to say that on the record. You guys have 90,000 people. Let me nerd out on you for just a second. Hopefully this is not too detailed. When we look at all of us individually, when I look at it statistically, we all have the same amount of commercial demand on average, right? And let's just call it 100 square feet for every man, woman, and child. But what's really interesting is when we look at much smaller populations like 10, 15, 20,000 people, they might have a demand for 100, but they only have the ability to support about 15 or 20 square feet of commercial space because the population is too small. It's what Mr. Adams was talking about. If you force a developer to build a bunch of commercial there's not a market for, it's a recipe for disaster. And so you need to understand that once we hit about 150,000, let's talk about you again. You're at 90,000 right now, not the city, but the JPA. You're coming up on that 150 very, very quickly. At that point, you reach full MSA status. That means you can fully absorb 100 square feet for every man, woman, and child. I believe you're around 70-something right now, so you still have or 60-something. I think you guys have quite a ways to go. There is a pent-up demand here that's not being answered, and it's not, pound my fist, it's not Amazon. Amazon's not going to make that up. We also find, what's interesting to me, is that you guys, when we look at your commercial, it's heavily weighted to retail. I'm not saying you have too much retail. In fact, you need more. You need something like a Target. You need a community shopping center. But your services, we talk about goods and services, office retail, your services appear to be lacking by a long shot. You could double the amount of office space, or not office, but the services that are rendered here, and you guys would still not be at equilibrium. So I foresee in the near 5, 6, 7 years an explosion of services coming to this area. Of course, that's assuming that economic development is able to attract them here. You guys have the demand, the pent-up demand, and as we look at other areas, we're seeing retail as the percentage of office and retail. We're seeing it tip more and more in favor of services. I think it's because boomers are getting older, they have money, they want an experience, they don't need to necessarily buy more things, and so I think that you're going to see that coming more as you get here. And forgive me if that's sort of out of place in these slides. You're going to need at least another 100 acres right now in the city. You don't need to build it right now, but you guys can easily absorb another 1 million square feet of industrial. The problem is, I don't really think you necessarily have the land dedicated for that that's not saying in one place, but you don't want 100 1-acre industrial lots. You need some scale so that people can build something 30, 40, 50 acres that comes along. And plan for employment centers. Some people associate industrial, and they say, well, we need more industrial. What they usually really mean is we need more employment center space. And again, Mr. Adams is very eloquent about talking about how in Edgewater there's going to be an employment center there. If you don't plan for it, it won't happen. Again, the key is making sure that 90 acres or whatever it is stays there. Don't run a new study and say, well, the demand in Edgewater is only, yeah, okay, the demand for Edgewater, right, it's 200,000 square feet. But the problem is, the Edgewater area, that's sort of the core, the heart, it's going to serve a much greater population around it. And if you have an employment center right next to a turnpike, it's a winner for transportation and for planning all the way around. And no, I'm not being paid by Edgewater. So the city facility needs, let's not talk about how many schools, but we forecast you're going to have by 2040 another 6,200 school-age children. Of that, just under half, 2,500, are going to be elementary school kids, 1,200 middle, 2,500 high. I'm aware that you guys have significant 55 and older communities, but when you look at the percentage of the entire area and growth, it's meaningful, but it's measurable, but you're not going to not have any school-age children. It's going to happen, and that's something that needs to be planned for. You're going to need 3 to 4 additional neighborhood parks. and 1 to 2 additional community parks. This is based on your own level of service standards. And again, within the city proper, you need at least 2 fire stations, probably 3. Now, talking about the overall JPA, am I going too fast or too slow, too much detail? I can clip right through these. I just don't want to run you guys over. But in the JPA, they're looking at adding another 24,000 housing units and 60,000 people just by 2040. Remember, this is in the JPA, so this includes Edgewater. Let's be realistic, okay? Edgewater's not been annexed at this point in time, so this includes Edgewater. But this is going to happen whether you say yes or no. Am I off by 1,000 people? Maybe. But this is my professional opinion of what's going to be happening. I would like you to be at the table and have a seat and have a say in how this goes about. For one thing, the sooner you come to the table, you can collect impact fees to help pay for some of the facilities that are undoubtedly going to be needed to support all these people. If we look all the way to build-out, now build-out is sort of forever from now, we're talking about adding 60,000 housing units and almost 150,000 people. That's a staggering amount of people. That means that by 2040, you guys are going to be about the same population as Martin County. Think about that for a second. It's important. So the time to plan now and plan for annexation strategically is the current moment in time. Think about legacy. So when I had finished running the model, actually I sort of roughed out the model. And I sat down and was looking at the sea of data. I'm like, I'm never going to be able to explain this to people. It's just too much. It's too massive. It's like talking about America, right? Okay, well, where are we talking about in America? Well, so I got, all creative and decided to go north, south, east, and west, and then the central area. What I wanted when you closed your eyes, you didn't have to think about what the boundary would look like. You just sort of in your head go, well, okay, south of the city, north of the city, and so forth. So as we talk about those, the north area, which is, not built out, but it's quickly approaching build out, it's going to be adding 6,000 housing units. This is from between now and forever. Another 17,000 people, probably are adding around 3,000 school-age children. It's going to need another neighborhood shopping center, a community shopping center. Another almost 1 million square feet could be supported up in that northern area. It's going to need another couple neighborhood parks, community parks, and the fire station. I bring that up, recognizing that north area, and by the way, when I say JPA North, I left out one small thing, is it's netted the city out of it. So if I'm talking about something, this is in addition to Southern Lake Ranch and whatever, right? So this means the unincorporated area in the northern part of the JPA. So the reason why I'm bringing up these parks, I'm not saying, hey, the county needs to build this. I'm saying if you annex that area, this is what you would be sort of on the hook to build in terms of facilities that these people are going to need. I know you don't build shopping centers, you don't build industrial, but these people are going to be needing these things, and if the land's not allocated, it's something to be thought of in the process. The south, that's a very amazing area. Again, we're looking at 24,000 housing units, 60,000 people just in that red area, 10,000 school-age children. That's a lot of high school football. 4 neighborhood shopping centers, 2 community shopping centers, almost 2 million square feet of industrial space, 7 neighborhood parks, 3 communities, 4 fire stations. What's important, the South is not tomorrow. It's happening, right? We have Green Island, and others in that area. What's important to think about is the land use allocation. Let's forget it. I do want to talk about density, but let's not talk about density for right now. If we don't make sure the land is reserved, it never can be built. And you have such a blank slate down there right now. Yes, I know the county's got a great mixed-use plan, but when the developer comes in, you've got to make sure the acreage is set aside, because we can go up to a point, but we also need, some width. And Mr. Adams also had a really great point too. If someone gives you land for a fire station, by all means, build it. Right? Don't let it just sit there forever, because then you give the developer a really good reason. Hey, I gave you that land, you didn't use that. Why do I need to give you land over here? Don't ask for what you don't need, but when you get what you need to take advantage of that and do it. Our model forecasts when and where fire stations are needed, and that data is already available. I'm not trying to sell you more stuff. You've already paid for it. When we talk about the east, this area is going to grow more slowly. With that said, as I was driving in today, I noticed is Harmony Ranch over there. That thing's growing looks like pretty quickly. That could influence the east to grow a little bit faster, or it could retard it because now all the demand right now is sort of being shifted to that Harmony area. But regardless, when we look at that east area, we're adding at least another 11,000 housing units, which equates to about 25,000 people, another 4,000 school-age children, a few shopping centers, another 1 million square feet of industrial space, more parks, and fire stations. Again, bringing that up for if you don't annex that, most of that's none of your problem. But if you're looking at annexing that and these things aren't there, you need to be thinking about, we better make sure that these things are allocated or figure out a way to provide for these things that are going to be desperately needed. I mean, if you annex, and let's say you have 1 million square feet of industrial that's not there, well, that means people are going to be driving even further, right? So we call that, in planner speak, we call it VMT, vehicle miles traveled, right? If the vehicle miles traveled is more than what it needs to be, you're wearing out your roads and creating a lot of congestion. The west area, AKA, let's call it Edgewater. It's not just Edgewater, it's several of those projects. Looking at 18,000 housing units, 45,000 people, another 8,000 school-age children, a few shopping centers, 1.5 million square feet of industrial space. And when I say industrial, again, it's that the light industrial type. Going to need a whole bunch of parks, looks like almost 7 parks there, and 3 fire stations, right? So it's not one, it's probably going to be 3. And that's largely not based on population, but it's probably going to be based more on response times. The central, this is basically the part of the city that's, or the area adjacent to the city that's not in the north, south, east, west area. It's very small, 100 housing units, a few hundred people. Just wanted to not leave it out. Talk about commercial demand. So the study area, that means the whole JPA, and I'm going to come back and I'll do the individual areas too, but we're looking at 12 neighborhood shopping centers, 6 community shopping centers, and 2 regional. You don't have any regional right now. You don't have any community right now. You do it just outside your boundary, you have a community. There's a Home Depot and some other things over there we would call a community shopping center, but you guys proper don't have one. Depending on how Thunder Lake Ranch develops, we foresee probably the first community shopping center popping up in that area, all things else being equal. If not, Toho would have been a great place for a community shopping center to come in. So I break these challenges and opportunities. So the challenge is, how do you, without buying it, because that's not your job, how do you make sure that these lands are remain available for these future things? Well, one of those is through your future land use map and strongly indicating where you would like to see these future commercial areas. It could be parcels or it could just be areas. But again, going back to Mr. Adams and ULI, make it easy to say yes to where these things really belong and be willing to say no where they don't belong. Talk about industrial space. What I would focus on, you can look at all the millions and millions of square feet, focus on the acres. By build out, you guys need almost 10 square miles of industrial land. So you don't need a 10 square mile industrial park. What you need probably between 5 and 10 300-acre parks, 200-acre parks, so that it comes up, 50-acre parks, so they add up to that 600 over time. Parcels that are adjacent to that turnpike and 441, mostly the turnpike, that is ideal for this industrial, the future workforce that people are going to need. Now, I know you have a lot of residential over there. What's not entitled, I'm not suggesting we change anyone's entitlements, but you need to strongly encourage people to reserve this land, and they're not going to like, industrial takes forever to develop, and so there's long-term carrying costs, so you need to make it worth their while, make it maybe easier for the developer to say, yes, I'm going to dedicate 80 acres, and yes, I understand it might take 30 years before there's a demand for it. But when that demand hits, land needs to be there so that we reduce VMT and have the jobs for ourselves and our children. Schools, let's just say we have a potential to have a whole lot of school-age children. Looks like 15,000 elementary school children, 7,000 middle, and 10,000 high school students. Will it work out exactly like that? I'll tell you when we get closer to the end of probably my lifespan. But there's a high likelihood. There's some very conservative numbers. Now, these are not wild numbers put in to just see if we can scare people. These are very significant numbers and worth paying attention to. Parks. So all we did was take your level of service and we applied it to the whole JPA. So you would know, if I annexed, what would I be in for? And so it looks like about 22 neighborhood parks, 9 community parks, and 3 regional parks. And so again, getting back to land use allocation, when a project comes in that's either already in the city or looking to be annexed, this is the time to reserve the land based on your own level of service standards. And again, if you need the model can help tell you what percentage. And something to keep in mind too is any one project might only have like a 30% demand for a park. But if there's no one else around it, that area provides, and I'm not saying it should be on the developer's back, but that area, that park capability then would serve the broader area, and that's something to keep in mind. If you look at it on a project-by-project basis, you're going to find that most of them are de minimis impacts or de minimis demand, but it didn't become a problem of a death of 1,000 cuts, right? If we have enough of these projects come along and none of them add up to more than a few percent of a park, well, in the end, we're not going to have any parks, and yet we need those to keep and maintain our high quality of life. Fire stations. Oh, the chief is going to talk to you about this later. I like jumping to 2040. You're going to need 6 fire stations. And when I say that, our analytics do not include all of the things that he has to look out for. We were talking today about his response times. Is, ideally is going to be, I think it's 5 minutes for EMS and I think 6 minutes for fire. I'm probably wrong on those times a little bit. The model doesn't say it can run traffic analysis because, let's be honest, a lot of the roads that these fire trucks are going to go on don't even exist yet, so I can't run a drive time analysis on it. But when he starts running it, he actually starts seeing an accelerated demand because he can't get from here to there in a timely fashion and save lives. So the challenge is to reduce response times and increase ISO ratings, thereby lowering your insurance costs across the board. And the opportunities these future projects offer people, developers want these permits, they want the entitlement. This is the time to get, fire stations don't need that much land. The chief can tell you more, but we, on average, we see, 1 to 4 acres, depending on the size of the fire station and what it's trying to cover. So these are not huge numbers throwing out. Shopping centers. Again, you guys are the government. You're not in this for to go out and build shopping centers, but it's important to be aware. And when we look at this map, you see all the red dots. Each one of those is 100 new housing units, not people, housing units. And so you start looking at the area west of the turnpike, and there's a whole lot of people that are likely to show up there. Now, the good news is most of them aren't showing up tomorrow, but they're coming. And so this map is intended to help you allocate and understand where things are needed. Those little red shopping bags, if you can see them, those are the regional shopping centers. And so we show one of them easily being located inside of Edgewater. Now, you could say, well, geez, Dave, at the bottom there in JPA South, you told me they're going to have 24,000 housing units and 60,000 people. That's a great area down there. And I wouldn't disagree with you. The problem is you have all these people that live up in the northern area. And so the model suggests more of an east-west alignment for those 2 regional shopping centers when it's all said and done. All I suggest is that you understand that these are coming. These needs, maybe, well, I'd tell you the regional, you guys are ready for regional. Probably in the next 7 or 8 years, you'll be ready for one. Incentivize that land to remain vacant so that the right thing can be built there. And it could be a wonderful mixed-use thing. And by mixed use, again, we're not talking about 700 units and a Chick-fil-A, right? A quick story about myself. I live in a community. We have 1,800 homes. We have a 3,000 square foot restaurant, and it can't stay in business. In theory, there's more than enough demand where I live to support that, but the problem is, we're human. Sometimes you want Mexican, sometimes you want Italian, sometimes you want Chinese. That one restaurant can't serve all the needs of the people that live there, and so people go elsewhere, and so what happens is there's not enough ultimate demand. There isn't enough concentration. There's not enough, I'll use the D word, density. I'm not saying all over where I live. I'm saying in where I live, if there was closer to 3,000 or 4,000 units, then we'd easily be able to support a single restaurant on our own. Fire stations. So the purpose of this map, the purple area is basically a 6 to 8 minute drive time And you can see sort of what I was saying before. When you look at the purple areas, the roads don't exist, so therefore the drive time analysis can't actually get to some of the locations. You'll see the yellow or golden ones are your existing fire stations. The red ones are future, what we think are future city-owned fire stations that don't exist at this point in time. And the blue ones are just in the JPA that may or may not be city-owned, depending on what you guys decide to annex and whatnot. But you can see, like over there in Edgewater, you can see there's one fire station needed at that what do they call it, the town center, that intense area with 3 to 4 million square feet. That makes all the sense in the world. And there's going to be another one to the south there. And again, that's just in that western JPA. Look at the south, and you can see there's about 5. Well, there's one existing. There's going to be 4 just needed in the south, mostly not because of population, but to keep the response times reasonable. Good news is I'm almost done. So I want to talk to you about legacy planning. I know we have comprehensive planning, you have current planning, you have long-range planning. I'm talking to you now. I'm talking to you as commissioners. You know, you're elected by the people, you know, of, by, and for the people to serve the people. And at the same time, many elected people are there because they want to make a difference. They want to make a mark. And I'm not here to tell you what your difference is or what your mark is. I just want to make sure you're aware that this is your opportunity. And it's a suggestion that I have. It's not commonplace all over the state of Florida. But my suggestion is that you all, either through a workshop or whatever is allowed with the Sunshine Law, develop a general philosophy of how you want to think about how this town should grow. Now, maybe y'all won't get along, right? Whenever you get 5 people in the room, you're going to get 5 different opinions. But this is a time to be thinking about what your legacy might look like and help shape your reasoning, your rationale for future councils. So when new people are elected, it isn't like, well, we're going to throw that whole thing out. That they'll, if not maybe embrace all of it, they'll understand why you made the decisions you made and hopefully maintain the vision, of course, with some flexibility and changes along the way. But one of the main underpinnings is fiscal responsibility, right? Response to the taxpayer, making sure that growth is paid for growth. So I do want to talk about density. I want to keep this as light as possible. But what does high density mean? You know, you hear the word density and high density, and it really comes down to perception. I know that when I was here a few months ago, your comp planning team showed you pictures of what density might look like, and you said they all look good, and they've ranged, some of those range, I think, from 40 units an acre all the way down to 10 or 12 units an acre. When it's done right, it looks really great. But what I want to talk to you about here is proximity. So this what do you call that, magenta area? What I did is I said, okay, I've got the shopping centers modeled, I've got the fire stations modeled, and I have the hospital modeled. And so I applied times to those, and I said, okay, show me everything within 5 minutes of a shopping center, within 5 minutes of a fire/EMS, and within 15 minutes of a hospital. And I said, if all those things are true, then I want a polygon, and so that's the polygon I got from this. Then on top of that, I laid your shopping center so you could sort of see how these things are there. I then want to bring up this concept of a density budget. So I know it can be uncomfortable when someone comes in and asks for, I want 200 units. Okay, on how many acres? 200 acres? No, I want to put it on 3 acres. Oh, that's a lot of units per acre. I want you to think that that's an important point, but I want you to think less about units per acre and think more about in terms of density does have a place. And those places are generally in good proximity to existing services, right? If you just in the middle of a farm field put 300 units, it's going to drive all of your municipal services crazy trying to provide services, something in the middle of nowhere, at the corner of Main and Main, and I'm hearing you loudly, okay? I know you have congestion problems, but if you did allow some density in those areas, you now have a developer that eagerly wants to put something in, you're going to agree to a density. 1, you're going to get impact fees. 2, that can also result in intersection improvements. And here's a question. If you have to improve roads, would you rather improve 100 miles of roads, or would you rather improve 10 miles of road? Right? If you locate that density along transportation corridors, it actually will save you money in terms of the ability to deal with the transportation issues. And we know that every land use decision is a transportation decision. So if you think about it in terms of a budget, so I was using an analogy when I was talking with Melissa. When I was younger in my life, I would feel guilty if I went out and spent $50 for going out to dinner. I then developed a budget, and I said, okay, I can spend $100 a week if I go out to dinner. And that way, if I go out to dinner, I spend $60. Instead of feeling bad about spending money that I probably maybe shouldn't be spending, well, I spent less than my budget, right? I had money allocated for it, and I spent below that, so I lived within my means. I felt good about that. I'd like to offer that as a perspective for you when thinking about density. So being a data guy, I got into your parcels, and I said, okay, first of all, the parcel has to be located within these well-serviced areas. They have to be more than an acre, but less than 40 acres, and they have to be vacant or nearly vacant, right? Highly underutilized. So we didn't go in and start redeveloping things. And it came up with just over 50 parcels, totaling 480 acres. Now, I didn't query what the existing entitlements were for those parcels. I'm sort of ignoring that, and I'm not saying that you're going to change the zoning of those parcels. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, okay, here are lands that I'm telling you make a very good case for being higher density, higher than base density. Don't give that density away, but as a council, you guys could establish a budget, and I'm just throwing out, I used 8 units an acre, 12 units an acre. Let's use 10, because 10's easy. But you have 480 acres, so that would be 4,800 units, more than what you have allocated right now. You can use that money, that density, or not. It's your choice. When the right project comes along, you can shower it with density, and if the right project doesn't come along, you don't have to use it at all. But by having this budget, you then give yourself permission that I'm not just willy-nilly assigning density all over the place. I'm staying within my means. There's a reason why this density is being allocated to these areas that make the most economic sense. The last slide that Mr. Adams had up was very, very interesting. In fact, I'm doing a somewhat similar presentation for the Florida Planning and Zoning Association at the beginning of June, and we went out and looked at existing shopping centers that are being redeveloped, and we're looking at the ad valorem taxes. It's a 10-fold increase going from this old commercial to new higher density, and I'm not talking 50 units an acre. I'm talking like 15, 20 units an acre. The money you receive in the ad valorem more than offsets the cost associated with those people living there. So again, the check marks to the right-hand side. So as projects are approved, then your budget, right, is reduced so that when you hit the magic number, whatever that number it is you guys pick, there's no more density until I get more facilities. It also then puts a developer on your side of, hey, I need a new fire station. You're right, you need a new fire station, because if we had a new fire station, then I'd get more of that pink area. If we had water and sewer services in this area, if we had more shopping centers, then these areas start expanding, and you have more areas that are more well allocated, more proximate to support higher multifamily densities and paying their own way. The goal is to head for fiscal neutrality. You need to figure out what your pressure points are. Are they facilities? I would argue probably yes, right? Fire stations, parks, schools, those things that we need, roads and infrastructure. And then land uses. We need to watch that balance, that allocation between residential, commercial, and industrial. And trying to ask these questions that are probably hopefully obvious. Is location important? You bet they're important. If we allocate all of the industrial at the south end of the JPA, okay, great, you've accomplished the aggregate goal, but because things aren't spread out where people can easily access them, then you're sort of shooting yourself in your own foot. Can co-locating facilities help? Yes, let's go ahead and we already have fire and EMS together. By co-locating facilities, that means government facilities, it's a win-win all the way around. And then what type of project should you encourage and where? Well, that's in a way kind of up to you, but you want to have things that are well located. You need to maximize your return on investment for the infrastructure that maybe you didn't spend, but your prior boards, your prior policymakers invested money in this town, in the roads and streets and water, sewer, and all those things. Not take advantage of them. Let's maximize the return on investment for those by increasing the ad valorem taxes, not by raising taxes, but by increasing the densities where it makes sense on very specific parcels that meet your criteria. And then how can redevelopment help? Well, I was just explaining that we did an analysis and found over and over again that the ad valorem increase in taxes was tenfold by redeveloping property into medium density multifamily units. I hope that wasn't too fast. I hope it wasn't too slow. Going for Goldilocks, so. Happy to answer any and all questions and take any and all criticism.
Well, thank you very much. Do we have any questions or input from council? Councilmember Askew.
Thank you. That was great. I really wish it worked that way. It doesn't seem to. What you mean by, yeah, you want to change the future in the maps and stuff? I didn't have a say what Edgewater came in. It was basically given to us and said, this is what you get. I really wish it worked that way. I wish that Melissa could go to the county and go, we want to park there, let's put this over here, let's put that over there, and gave her marching orders to do that. And I would love to see that cooperation between the two entities happen. I don't see that happening right now. And I'm a JPA guy. I like the idea of JPA. I like to be at the table. I like to at least make a decision on part of that. But again, I think, and I do think that working with the county is it totally improved with Mr. Sturgeon, and I really am hoping that the next council can continue that effort. But really, the two need to be communicating even better. Everything that you're saying on here, I agree with. The problem is I don't have a say. I really do wish I did have a say. I mean, I'm just trying to be realistic here. Your models look fantastic, and if we can get to that point where we do have Mr. Sturgeon, we gave him marching orders, we think we'd love to have a park in Edgewater, and can we move this? It doesn't work that way. I mean,
Well,
in
not-
reality, it doesn't.
Not on land you don't control, but.
Right.
If you annex, like, you have full control in the city. You can at least, or explain to me how you don't have control in the city of
Okay.
approving a project.
Let me give you an example,
Okay.
Edgewater.
What?
Edgewater.
That's not in the city. That's why I'm, in the
Right.
city, we have
So
full
we
control.
don't have any control of the land that, and, unless we went ahead and mass annexed over across Kissimmee Park Road, I don't have a say because it's not into the city.
Agreed.
So unless these five up here decide, hey, you know what, we want to say, we want to be at the table, we're gonna, the JPA, we're gonna move it, we're gonna change some of the rules. We don't have any rules on our streets. Some of those are the sort of the things that frustrate me that, I try to fight for the citizens, but sometimes you can't because they already approved the development. Then it comes in front of me and then I'm fighting with them, but really it was already approved. So,
Well, some of the raw entitlement of 7,000 units and, some very basic numbers, correct? Or am I wrong?
Right.
I'm asking, I don't know.
no, let's bring up Toho. Toho was approved by the county. Their impact for the mobility fees went to the roads. We really didn't have a say for that. It did get into the city. I think they're doing a great job if you compare it to Kindred next door. But everything you're telling me, I really wish that we did have a say. I wish that we could be at the table. So you're sort of telling me that I have to mass annex in the JPA to really have a say, unless I go and say, hey, staff, I need a police station, and the only one I've seen future for, I've seen some future park stuff, and I've seen our chief fire department go, yeah, here's all our places, we need a fire station. So to make this work correctly, we need to have marching orders to go, okay, if we take a look at the North GPA and the South, we need to right now go, this is what we would like from the county, and then we have to get the county to approve that. Is that what you're telling me that we need to do?
Well, I think that you should, I'm not gonna tell you what you should do, right? Thou shalt not should. If I were you, I think I would annex the West yesterday, because that would give me a lot more say, a seat at the table. And yes, they have these basic entitlements, but Edgewater is not all of the JPA West. There is a lot of land there, and there are some basic entitlements. And I'm not talking about taking away anyone's entitlements. I'm saying, okay, you got those things, but you know what? When y'all bring all those people have needs.
Right.
And it isn't for like some private club park. We need, the 2 community parks, 5 neighborhood parks. And I'm not saying that Edgewater pays the whole way, but if the build out, so the build out of the JPA or the JPA West is 18,200. Between friends, my engineer friends, let me do some voodoo math here. Let's just say then that Edgewater is what, 40% of that, something like that? Well, then it probably should have 40% of, don't worry about the shopping centers, they're gonna more than take care of the commercial, but those parks and the fire stations, that kind of thing, there's case in point. And if you want me to go to court for you, I will. I'll show the judge, these are the things that are needed, and this is why.
Right, but you just saw the presentation that came before us, the West JPA, that's already on paper, built out, plotted sort of. South JP, same way, East JP, it's all
But those
sort
are
of done.
those are gross entitlements, sir. I mean, the street level planning for most of it hasn't been done. It sounds like, I'm guessing what some of these terms mean. To me, SDP means a site development plan, a PSP means a preliminary subdivision plat. I don't know if that's what it means here or not. So this thing's coming, but if the city annexed, I think you would have more say, and saying there's 7,000 units and 4 million square feet of commercial is not completely planned out. There is a lot of planning still yet to be done. It doesn't necessarily get reviewed by your planners, other than, does it meet this minimum and that minimum? That I think you can have a seat at the table, and these things can be arranged. Land for parks, land for the fire stations, and one, maybe more, I don't know.
Right. I mean, I'm not complaining. I'm just trying to
No,
bring
I-
up the
and I'm-
reality of the whole thing here. Being up here for about 7.5 years, you kind of go, we've been trying to do different things, and we've tried different maneuvers, but I really wish we had a seat at the table. Everything you're telling me, I love this to all happen. I just don't see it. I mean, in the future, I hope it does happen, so.
And if you annex before they start building, then you get those impact fees too. I'm assuming you guys have a park impact fee? I'm sorry, I don't know.
There is.
But, so right now, if you wait too long, well, then they're gonna need parks and you won't have the impact fees. But the sooner you move, and I'm not, if you don't wanna take the whole blue area, I'm not trying to tell you what you should do. It's really, you are the policymakers, and I fully respect you. Like I said, I've been elected myself before. It takes a lot to be there. You make a lot of decisions on TV. Most people don't have to do that. I fully appreciate what your role is and your purview. I'm just giving you my suggestions, and forgive me if I was being too forceful with them.
No, I appreciate it. Everything that you were saying, I believe. I believe in the JPA. I believe that if we do annex in with a great partnership with the county has great ideas, and I think the city has great ideas. I wish the two would mesh a little bit better, and some of this stuff could be done a little bit easier. And I understand that, people own land and developers have their own idea, and the county has theirs and we have ours, so.
Mr. Sturgeon?
Any other council members? Questions?
Well, yes, I
I'll
just had your line
I'll
earlier.
wait till we're done, Mayor.
Councilmember Urban?
Yeah, I'd just like to echo what Councilmember Askew was saying. Just to put it out there to council, I'm in favor of controlling our destiny. I want a seat at the table, and I think St. Cloud should be at the driver's seat, and if that means annexing in large portions like the West JPA, I would be in favor of that, because I think that we, like you said, the growth is going to come whether we do that or not, and I would prefer St. Cloud being in control of the growth that does come. So just wanted to put that out there.
Mr. Sturgeon?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say a couple of things. One of the notes I made was strategic annexation. So to me, we have to couple that with the economic impact analysis. We've got the data now, and remember, this is an ongoing project with David. The next step is to come back and look at scenarios. Take that JPA and make it into an amoeba and move it around, and that starts to align with that strategic vision of the council, and how do we, and then I was just talking to the finance director earlier today, that we'd had to look at what does it cost. And I think Mr. Trace has made that point. Let's make sure that we can afford those services.
And me,
And, yes, ma'am.
many times.
Actually, all of you.
Mr. Manzares?
And I just want to remind the council, as you well know, there's been a lot of talk about Edgewater, but staff is plowing ahead with an annexation of that property as quickly as we possibly can. That's part of the agreement we have with Edgewater. All the things have been talked about. Those are issues that staff is working on with the idea of bringing those back to address those issues. The problem is, and Mr. Askew has been up here the longest, he knows this, is some of these projects were planned, entitled at a point when the issues weren't really being as discussed well enough between the county and the city, and we're trying to deal with those now. And the council was forced in the position to basically say, we're going to annex them the way we are, or we're not going to annex them, and they're going to get built anyway, and then we're going to have to deal with the fallout without the impact fees, without the stuff. So the plan is, at least as it relates to Edgewater, is that all the impact fees will be paid. There won't be any building permits issued for that project until it's annexed, and so but that's the working plan on that.
Councilmember Trace?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Great information. Kind of wish we had this 10 years ago to help some of these decisions. kind of first question for staff while he's still here is, does this give you guys enough information to make good decisions on what we're planning for the future land use element? I don't know who would answer that from staff, but
Could I ask Melissa Dunklin to come up, Mayor?
yeah, I just want to make sure that the questions we're asking, the information provided by the consultant is good information to implement what we feel is right for that future land use element.
Yes.
You got there, said one word.
Thank you.
Good, next question?
Remember, he
man.
said make yes easy, right?
I'm used to John going on for 4 minutes so I can prepare the next question, so my bad. So it's I took notes as you were going through, so this is kind of in the same order as your presentation. Office needs, I feel we have a huge office need in St. Cloud, in the core, in the fringe, in the JPA, everywhere. And it feels like it's being met in flex industrial areas. There's random shops that are like more retail focused in that that industrial area between Old Hickory Tree and Hickory Tree. Like, it's just random things that you feel like would be great things for along 192 or in downtown, but like they just are forced over there because that's the only space that's being provided. And it's probably not even designed properly for what they're doing because it's flex industrial and it's more designed for the, AC repairman that just has a couple trucks there and, they kind of set from there. So it's us setting up some of those uses in some other areas to have real office space.
And remember, I said not just build a bunch of office buildings. I meant service. You need restaurants. Not that you don't have them, but I think there's a pent-up demand here that the commercial real estate people haven't fully appreciated. Maybe they have. I know that I'll be speaking for economic development I think in July sometime. I'll be giving a version of this presentation, but more on the aspects of the unmet needs that we've been able to identify from not from a government standpoint, but from a supply chain, from a land supply. You guys have the land, the demand is here, and I'm going to help sort of put those two together so it helps your commercial real estate people bring in those specific retailers and service providers that will help you grow the way you need to.
That is perfect, because that was one of my summary comments of how do we implement this in the next steps of getting those just finite specific uses and properties there. So that's perfect. Institutional, is there an institutional type model? Because I worry if the city's going to, just looking at this map, 6x, 7x in size, the institutional services that we need for schools are figured out and they have a kind of a good model for that, but road and bridge and utilities and now a Toho Water Authority, like some of the services that they need and some of those locations that we need, is that something you guys can provide in a model like this, or is that just us having to figure out on a different avenue?
So first, I'm a modeler, so of course I can model anything, but working backwards. So if I can, we're both engineers, so hopefully I can get picky for it. So when you say institutional, I think of the DOR codes 70 through 79.
Oh, you
meaning
went way too deep for
assisted
me.
living facilities, nonprofits, those sorts of things. And really what I'm hearing from you is really more almost the government type facilities. So at the end of the report, and you may have missed it, but unless you got the right version, it has water and sewer demands at the back of it. Yeah, so we ran, it was based on some very vanilla, didn't pay very much for it, and I can get very specific in that model, but I put some general factors in to give you an idea of if in fact you turned the whole JPA into the city, and if in fact you guys provided all the water and sewer, those would be the demands that you guys would be looking at, and they're staggering. They're very, very big numbers. Regarding bridges and things like that, not so much. The traffic modelers, I know that through your comprehensive planning, that I think Stantec is doing your transportation modeling. We're providing both the employment and the population data to them so that they can run their models to model the traffic. And there's one other thing. I guess you didn't specifically ask about like the ALFs and things like that, but that is a land use that's underappreciated. It's also one of those things that tends to come later in the life cycle of a city. So you're going to probably start seeing that, especially over the next 5 to 10 years. You'll see 1 or 2 pop up, and then probably more of them as these 55 and older communities, if they can't age fully in place, they're going to need to go somewhere else. And I'll bet you're going to see a fair number of those, not a crazy number, but it wouldn't shock me if by 2040 that you had like 10 major ALFs in this area.
Perfect. And I think on the utility side, I was hoping that would be part of the presentation because it was a part of the backup. I think we have, it's behind you, Toho's utility director and our environmental services director here to hopefully some of those numbers make sense with the plans that they're implementing on our water permits and our sewer permits. So,
And not to give a commercial, but, we help on water and sewer master plans with the big engineering companies all the time, providing both the full-time population, seasonal populations, workers, whatever they need to help model the existing and then the future conditions all the way to build out. So,
okay. Kind of stepping back in some of these areas, office parks, right? Like stepping back to all of Central Florida, you have the Central Business District in downtown Orlando, and then I worked in an area at Sand Lake and John Young for a long time that had, I think Duke was the group that put this office park together, but it probably had 1 million, 2 million square feet of office all in an area, and there was like a Walmart there, and now it's a major corridor. How do we try to figure out if that kind of office complex is something that could be done here?
okay, so I'm going to do some rough
Like
math.
regionally.
Yeah, rough math in my head. So for that kind of square footage, you're talking about a minimum of 150 acres, right? I mean, you didn't say how many stories they are, but you're probably looking at at least 150, a minimum of 100, and that would be all two-story if that was the case.
I think that one was 3 and 4 story was most of the
3 and
building.
4, okay, so maybe you can whittle that down to maybe 100 acres. The problem is talking to a developer where you say, okay, let's just pick a number, let's call it 5 units an acre. Okay, you could build 500 units and have money today, or you could set that land aside and you can, onesie twosie, wait until the demand catches up with it. That's the challenge. With that said, for every stick there's a carrot, and so I would recommend that you find the carrots that are going to allow the West JPA, the South JPA to allocate that land that will allow for those future employment centers. I think you'd be able to support at least one of those, if not 2 of those in the future.
And it's a matter of how do we get to that implementation? Is that something we know there's a big demand now, and just having our economic development department, our planning department reach out to those folks and make that presentation like the one you were talking about in June or July?
To a point, but you don't have, near as I can tell, you don't have a demand for 2 million square feet of
not today,
office
yeah.
park right now. Because so when I talked about local, what I left out, sorry, was the L word, local. When I said that we all have a demand for about 100 square feet, that's to meet your needs. Above and beyond that are the employment centers, right? And so that is not based on, the beautiful thing about employment centers is they rarely get their business from the area they're located. Like down where I live, we have a big programming company, Granger, I think they're international. They have headquarters right there in Fort Myers, and they employ thousands of people at well over $100,000 a year, and almost none of the business comes from the Fort Myers area. It all comes from outside. And so the thing is yes, through economic development and finding people that are looking for any place in the world where they can go, try to attract someone like here. I can tell you in this, and I know what I'm about to say might sound difficult, but Auburn, Alabama is one of our clients. And one of the things they do really, really well is they go down and take down modest pieces of land, and they fully develop the infrastructure for industrial, and then they offer the land for free only to those industrial users that check all the right boxes. Are you a heavy water user? Yeah, we don't want you. Are you going to employ one person per 100,000 square feet? Yeah, we don't want you either. Do you want this? Do you want that? And those things that meet their criteria, then they give the land away. Of course, they get the ad valorem taxes and all of that, and it more than pays for itself. So when I look at Collier County, they have 38 square feet of industrial for a man, woman, and child. You guys have about 22. In fact, the whole county has about 22 to 25 square feet of industrial space for every man, woman, and child. Auburn, Alabama has like 75 square feet for every man, woman. It's because they go out of their way. But now, your economic development person, they're not magic, all right? The magic part of what I just said is the city actually goes out and takes down the land themselves. They don't find a developer. They take down the land. They develop the parcels. Again, they don't build buildings. If they get it already, the backbone infrastructure, so it makes it easy for someone to come in and say, you know what? I think I do want to be in St. Cloud. It's probably something like that. I know that's a very grandiose idea.
Well,
I think,
and that's why I'm appreciative of what the county did with Neo City, and I'm hoping that pays dividends and kind of carries over to here. We don't have that kind of jack, so, we're looking for something a whole lot smaller, and I personally don't think we should be in the development business, but incentivize and try to create those, what did you call it, density budgets or whatever to make that something that is that can make sense. Another kind of stepping back thought, Apopka right now, and I see it in the Orlando Business Journal a bunch of like industrial center after industrial center going in Apopka, and there's nothing crazy about the location of them, and it's close to 429, but it's on 441. Is that something that we can have here, or did that kind of take that industrial demand for that aspect of Central Florida? It just all went there instead of coming here, or is that like a local demand that they have? They have like 6 million square feet all going up like right now.
Yeah, well, so I don't know who those tenants are. That would be probably very telling. I know that even down south, we have Amazon building a couple million square feet. So the demands that I'm projecting, that I'm showing up here, do not assume that you have every out-of-town industrial developer wanting to come in. So a lot of that's going to be supported right by the people that are going to live here and the services and things they're going to need. Now, some of that industrial is, of course, not for the things that they're going to be building things or making things or storing things that maybe won't be used in this area, which is ideal. Then you have money coming into the economy and not going out of the economy, right? I would hazard to guess, and it's a guess at this point, that the well is not dry, that does not take in all the demand. We're seeing more and more of a conversion from retail on an aggregate basis to more of the industrial type uses as the Amazonification of the world happens. And we don't think that everything is going to go Amazon. I think stores are still going to be needed. People still want those experiences. But I think there's still ample opportunity as long as you preserve land in the right location. You put it in the middle of the city, probably not the best, plan. Of course, there's not land there. Putting it along the turnpike, along 441, that those are choice areas that, again, it might be as simple as just making the land allocated, making the future land use map show that. Of course, many of these areas aren't even in the city, so you don't have that ability. But I think that there's ample demand for industrial out there, and you guys have far under your share, I think.
Okay. There were a couple spots on the map that I noticed were missing. St. Cloud Commons was one that was your mid-sized commercial that I don't think was on there. And then in your drive time map, it showed a gap of an area, and there's like a neighborhood Walmart that just got put in there a couple of years ago. So just want to make sure that if there's aspects like that we can
Happy to talk to you about those.
Yeah.
The reason why the neighborhood Walmart isn't showing is because it doesn't quite meet our definition of a neighborhood center. It's just like an Aldi's. Now, you take an Aldi's and you put a few more things around it that it's those ancillary needs. I'm going to go to Aldi's, and I'm going to go to Chick-fil-A, and I'm going to go to the Hallmark store. Okay, now that's more of a neighborhood shopping center.
Okay.
It's providing some of my essential needs. There's vacant land around that neighborhood. Well, it's absolutely going to become its own neighborhood center.
Oh, okay. So it's just not there yet.
It's just
Okay,
not
perfect.
quite. And I'm not disparaging that. It's just we want to see a few more out parcels, a few more ancillary things to make it worth your while. You can get more things done. So I don't go there to do my shopping, and then I drive into town to go to McDonald's, kind of thing.
Okay, because maybe we need to map out some of those that are close to it, because then we would make a land use decision based on that being a need, but it's already 90% of the way fulfilled by that. So, okay. I guess it's something we got to look into. When
Right.
we get to
It's
that.
going to develop already without you doing anything. Well, you got to approve those out parcels when they come along and in your building department, but that's already well on its way to a neighborhood shopping center. Things that I would like to focus on would be more like Center Lake Ranch, the community shopping center. They're going to have a mass of people there. They've got a nice amount of land. They've got not much frontage there on the main road. That's certainly a possibility. You also have some commercial land along 441, just east of, I'm going to get this wrong, the Crossing?
Narcoossee.
Yeah, Narcoossee, yeah. 192 Narcoossee is a great location for something like that.
Okay. The density budget was an interesting concept. I kind of like that. How do we tie some of those decisions into a financial decision? Because to me, if you have the density, it does generate more revenue, and hopefully it generates less cost per acre. But how do we kind of get that into a financial analysis? I know we do the economic and fiscal impacts for major developments, but how do we kind of use this tool to make some of those decisions without having to take a 30-day study?
It's an interesting question. I wasn't prepared for that one. So I think, so first of all, the density budget is to say, okay, we're willing to give X number of units. And again, I'm not here to preach to what that X is. I like the number of about 4,800 units that you don't have to spend, again, because you're not allocating it to land. So we don't want to give it to land so then people say, hey, you're taking my rights and I'm taking it away. So it's sort of this thing that's floating out there. It's not associated with any parcel whatsoever, but those parcels that come in, those properties that come in that happen to be well located, and you've advertised that you're willing to entertain the idea of more density if they check all the right boxes, and then it gives you something to a way to give density without feeling like you're saying yes to every single project that comes in the door, and it gives a finite amount of units where you can say you could always raise the number in the future, but when the facilities, when all those black parcels are gone and or no more facilities are built, sorry, our high-density budget is gone. It's done, and the rest of it's going to be more suburban. Now, if we got some more facilities, we got some more schools, some more parks, some more fire stations, those sorts of things, well, then suddenly that well-located area grows and allows for and accommodates easily more multifamily. In terms of the financial relationship, I like the idea of what Mr. Adams had up there. He was showing that on, was it 253 units, I think, or 253 acres, he could build this one project, but if he did it at a quarter-acre lot, then he was like over 3,000 acres. And the thing is, I still have to provide services. Go ahead and ask your fire chief, is it easier to put out fires on 250 acres or 3,000? And that's an easy one. The 250 is definitely what you want. I think that by having the density at the areas arguably where you're most congested now, it allows the city to put some of that on the developer, right? Because if they want the density, you can give them some density. Maybe they help with some of your intersection issues. And again, if the development's going to happen anyway, do you want to have to widen all the roads in the entire city, or just improve 192? So by focusing your density along certain corridors where they make sense, also the more people you put in, the more walkable the community becomes. And you might, I'm not saying you will, but you might even experience fewer trips, because instead of driving to Publix, they're just going to walk next door to Publix. But you need to have, one project's not going to get that done. It's going to be several that's going to achieve that. Add enough people that then also the restaurant starts popping up because you have enough people located along the corridors in close proximity.
Okay. Well, and some of that too is connectivity to make that happen, right? So us implementing in our code forced connectivity for certain things instead of just a bunch of dead-end neighborhoods or...
Right. Forced connectivity is a very good thing. It drives me nuts when I drive to something where I think I should be able to drive into the next parking lot and I can't. But part of that connectivity is your sidewalks. Because, again, I'm not saying you're going to walk from one end of 192 to the other. It'd be like, walking from one end of Las Vegas to the other. It'd take you forever. But those areas that if you look at the two halves, the two sides there, those both ends have the shopping centers, they have the fire stations, they have those things, and I think you're going to have people walking very, very short distances, and hopefully not have to use their car. I'm not saying they're never going to drive. They're going to have to go to work. I know all those things. But again, by focusing, you then reduce the amount of infrastructure improvements you need to make. Anyway, get off my soapbox.
Well, and I purposely tried to walk, and I think last week I did it, to Publix and the restaurants by Publix from my house, and it's not an enjoyable experience with even Neptune Road, 192, Kissimmee Park Road. It's just not an enjoyable experience. There's no tree cover, but I need to get my steps in, so I just do it anyway.
Right.
So, whether it comes to fruition or not, based on the way commercial properties develop now and the way they have to develop for the view corridors and the parking lots and everything is just, I don't know, it is what it is. Last item that I have, I think, fire stations and the JPA boundary are two big things that I was excited for this study to try to figure out. One, where does the city boundary ultimately end? And I think to answer that question is how the city and the county both, collaborate on where fire stations go. And this is kind of the broad brush, and then I think the chiefs and everyone need to get together to just implement and talk about specific areas of where does the city stop because it makes sense for that to happen, and where does a county station go or a city station go, or maybe we have joint stations. I don't know if that's possible.
That's over my pay grade.
Yeah, well, and that's just one of those that I hope this gives a lot of the information for both staffs to make those decisions, because that's the big thing that makes sense to me of why we have the JPA is how to plan some of these major infrastructure, because you don't just move a fire station overnight, and it's not like you can increase your or decrease your drive time from something unless you put in more roads or make other changes. And that was part of the reason for my questions about the turnpike and the crossings there, because that's going to have a huge implication on, can we actually get there to service both sides of the turnpike? Because for me, the JPA line was just kind of that was our utility boundary or something, and it just ended up that way. But these need to be based on, in my mind, natural and man-made boundaries. So like once we crossed the turnpike, that was just like us going over the deep end of crossing the turnpike, and now we're on the other side, and we have to almost service the whole other side. Same with Narcoossee Road and some of those other areas. If once we cross it, then you might as well just take the whole thing in. So that's kind of my thoughts on that.
I applaud your thoughts on connectivity because, proximity is the 90210. I don't care how nice something is, if you're not well located, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah. So I guess next question to staff is, does this provide the information you guys need to make some of those decisions and have some of those conversations between the county and city on where do we grow and how do we grow?
Yes.
Okay.
It doesn't replace the policymakers, and it's the goal of this is to give you the food to think about, the things that either you like or you don't like. And I'm here. I'm on. I have a budget. You guys have questions. I'll do my best to answer them. And I mean, after today, if there's an issue that comes up, we want to help you. You've made a substantial investment, and we've taken a long time to learn.
Hi, I just wanted to ask a clarifying question. So when you say that the city and county staff are not working well together in some of these respects, I think at a staff level, we feel like we are working well together. So I guess we feel like we need a little bit of direction on those areas that are already entitled, that, like the mixed-use districts. What is your direction to staff for those areas that already have the conceptual master plans moving forward? Do you have any direction for us on that?
I think you guys are working. I think you guys are working great together. It's like up Narcoossee Road. A lot of that's already developed.
So the places that are not currently in, I guess, planned out to the concept plan level.
Well, and even Edgewater, since we've said it 47 times, it might not necessarily, because of the shape of Edgewater, be the entire thing comes into the city. Maybe there's a spot where it makes sense because of a natural boundary, because of the turnpike coming through it or whatever, that it makes sense that that's not in the city. It doesn't have to be the whole development, I don't think, in my personal opinion.
I'd be happy to talk about it. I'm just going from 7.5 years of, I love to hear that you're working great with the county, and I think recently, probably in the last year, maybe, actually, I think when Bill came on, I think that started to mend a lot of things. So I don't think it's perfect. I think when and I don't hear enough from staff because I'm not here to run the day-to-day. That would be Mr. Sturgeon. But, I guess maybe it's some heartache from the years past where we've been trying to get things and try to work a little bit better. So I love hearing that. I think that's great. Keep marching on. And I'm a JPA guy. I think you all know how I feel about the map, and there's not a lot you can do with the Edgewater. You got to work with what you're working with, and it's basically, I'm not going to say done for you, but I appreciate Mr. Manzares and Bill and you guys as staff trying to get what we can get for our citizens of St. Cloud. So,
Councilmember Matheny.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for all the information. I'm really excited for the next step. Like, it's the next step that I want. So I've been saying, I know Mr. Trace, but I've been saying for 6 years, like, what's the limits of the city? And especially when we had the utilities, I was like, are we going to bankrupt ourselves? And even the previous city manager was always like, well, we have to keep annexing because that's how we pay for things. And I'm like, that's a flawed system because eventually you're done annexing. So, we had a previous presentation, and I was pretty vocal about how upset I was that not with you, but a different consultant, because I felt like all they were was just trying to shove growth and density down our throats and not really thinking of it from the perspective of what is a good, logical place to stop the limits of the city. So I'm really excited to get to the next phase with this. I don't agree with annexing things yet wholesale until we get to that next step to kind of look at it and see what makes sense. I know this decision needs to happen because it's challenging for everyone trying to make big regional decisions, you know, the fire stations being the one I hear about the most. But I can't wait for the next step on this. But the other thing I wanted to say is when I got on council like 6 years ago, there was, I would say, more confusion in the relationship between the county and the city. I feel like a lot of it, I think it was a confusion. Like there was some staff at the city that was like, don't send us stuff, we don't have time. And then, you know, then everyone else was like, why the heck aren't we seeing anything? And that letter comes to light. And, you know, I think we've worked better, you know, each day, I think we work better together. I know that we just adopted finally some residential architectural standards that were just basically the county's earlier version, but I understand that the county is doing new version. So I would like, since we're kind of talking about county and stuff, I mean, I would like to adopt that immediately because it's better standards than we have now. So we could get that in place, and that also will help with the coordination between the two entities. But yeah, I'm just, when are we gonna get that next piece that you're gonna have to kind of mess with the limits of the city?
I'll work with your staff, and we can definitely do some scenario planning and just, you know, the what if you added this or took away that, and there might be some guidance needed from you policymakers about, you know, what is your end goal? You know, is it compact development, or is it, you know, we want the non-residential uses because that generates more revenue, right? Taxes, and yet doesn't ask for a lot of services. And I don't know, I'm not saying that your staff needs guidance, I'm just saying that those are some of the things that can be considered or not considered. We consider water and sewer consumption because we've when we ran that model, that's actually on a TAZ by TAZ basis, so you could look at some of the, maybe the lower use ones, and this might be counterintuitive, and say, well, maybe we don't want those because that means more of a lower density, rural, more spread out, more costly to provide services. And I'm not saying that's the answer, I'm just saying these are examples that we're ready to run. We have money in the budget, we're gonna run some scenarios and so forth. Do you have anything to add?
Well, the other thing I really liked your idea about the bank of density. I mean, because in our last meeting that we had with the county, the thing that I was saying that I didn't like was I feel like we're just doing density, you know, like blanket density, where I was saying, you know, to me, density makes more sense around a city center, you know, to like feed the services. So I do like the idea you're saying to come up with like a bank of density that, you know, it's like to incentivize high level development, like if you do these things, and we wouldn't provide it to everyone, obviously, we'd have to be very selective, but I like that as a way to incentivize as well.
Yeah, again, I would not tie that to a parcel because you don't want to,
right.
I want you to have the power, you know, and if someone proposes, and I'm going to say, I don't want to offend anyone, 25 units to the acre, but if it checks all the right boxes, if they gave us a park and they did this and they improved that intersection, they put in a signal that we needed, it's paying for, you know, that might be the right thing in the right place at the right time, and I'd like you to have that ability, so when the right project comes to the door that solves problems, that creates problem for you all, that you have the ability, and not only the mental ability to say, you know what, we have a budget, let's use it on this. This is the right thing to spend it on, in terms of
Great, thank you.
density.
Mr. Sturgeon?
Yes, Mayor, may I ask David a question? I don't want to put you on the spot, David, but my intent was to come forward next month with those scenarios. Is that going to be a heavy lift for you, or can we do that?
Next month, meaning about 30 days from now?
Yes, sir.
We'd have some, sure. We have talked to some very big picture ideas. I need to get a little more specific. But yeah, we can have some of the things that I've talked with the staff about can be done in a week or so. Other things like wholesale changes in density, that takes longer to make those changes and such.
I guess my proposal, council, is we have come back with those big, large scale, then get some policy direction so he can start refining that, what that looks like, instead of him, you know, putting a bunch of scenarios that may not fit what your expectations or vision is.
Councilman Raskin?
When you do come back, can you please invite the county again to be present?
County, can you come? All right. Thanks. So they'd be here. Thank you.
And I'm here every Thursday, so we can do it anytime you want.
Okay. I think great discussion, a lot of educational material, but I mean, the iron's hot. Let's keep going and make those policy decisions. So I can start
So,
working on
Mr.
stuff.
Farmer, we certainly thank you for your presentation, all the work you've done. Looks like we're going to be continuing on with a strong relationship in the future. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. We really appreciate you guys, and this is a really, really, really cool city, and I'm happy for you guys.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
We have a fire department update.
Well, I'd like to start off just after those last two presentations by saying, in conclusion, quite literally, and make it easy on everybody, they've really kind of painted the picture for the future of the St. Cloud Fire Department. It's clearly evident that based off the JPA, based off of our current standings, we're going to need some more fire stations. But we'll get into that here in just a moment. Obviously, Jason Miller, your fire chief here at St. Cloud, I thank you for the opportunity to come speak before you. I'm representing the fire department and where we're at now and where we hope to be in the future. As you know, our fire department's been around since 1912, and it's grown tremendously since then. The city of St. Cloud has also. I have some great officers behind me. Chief officers, without them, my job would be impossible. So I thank them for being here. Bill Linton from Osceola County Emergency Management was supposed to do a brief presentation on this upcoming hurricane season. However, he got tied up with some other things and was unable to make it. I would like to let everybody know there is a Hurricane Expo May 28th from 10 to 1 o'clock at Osceola Heritage Park. And hurricane season is just around the corner. It's not too early to start getting ready. Last 2 weeks ago now, I was down at the Hurricane Conference, and they're expecting a much busier season than on average. He's hoping, again, Bill Linton's hoping to come and do a little presentation on the hurricane season in the next council meeting if possible. As we currently sit, St. Cloud Fire Rescue has 3 fire stations. We have 75 personnel on shift. They're divided between 3 shifts amongst the 3 stations. Our downtown station obviously has a little bit more people than the other stations. We run an engine and 2 ALS rescues and a chief officer out of there. Fire Station 32 off Old Canoe Creek. It runs an engine and 2 rescues out of there. They are crammed in there like cordwood. On Friars Cove Lane out south of town, obviously, we have an engine and a rescue down there. Service area is approximately 27 square miles. Our average response time currently from being dispatched to arriving on scene is 7 minutes, or just under 7 minutes. That does exceed what is approved by the city council on the fire rescue element of the comp plan. Under the fire rescue element, the city of St. Cloud Fire Rescue is supposed to have a 5-minute response time for EMS calls and a 6-minute response time for fire calls. So we're a little off the mark there. I think that the previous presentations have highlighted the fact that we need 2 additional stations in the very near future, one of which we're working on currently to address those needs. Obviously, on the west side of town, we have the Toho area, which combined with Fire Station 32's area is a very heavily demand area based off of call volume for us. On the east side of town, not quite as high of a call volume in the east section, but the response times out there are lagging. Thanks to a great relationship with the county back there, Chief Collier, we do get some initial response out of their engines, which helps lessen that burden on us. And for the record, I'd like to say that Chief Collier and I have been working together for about 8 years, and I think we get along famously. We have a lot of meetings. We meet monthly along with Chief Walls from Kissimmee. We do monthly meetings, go over what our plans are, what our dreams are, what's going on with our different departments. So we have a great connection, a great relationship, and realistically, it helps all of us. We recently, in the county, they had a little incident where a firefighter was attacked, and before they even called or asked, we moved an engine rescue up into their station. It was just one of those things that's what we do. We react and we handle situations in the county. Call volume continues to be a growing challenge in the city, obviously. The city of St. Cloud this last year had in excess of a 17% growth in call volume. Over a 5-year trend, we're looking at over 9% per year. I fully expect, based off of our year-to-date call volume, that will continue. As of April 11th, when I ran this last report, we're tracking right at about 9.5% over previous year. So again, it's right in line with where we're expecting to be. That'll push us pretty close to 9,500 calls this next year. Obviously, as it currently sits, our downtown station is the busiest station, which you can see there, running over 4,000 calls a year, primarily because we have the 2 rescues that run out of that station, so it's really covering 2 districts, but also because the downtown area realistically has the highest density. It's built out. You don't have a whole lot of growth potential in the downtown area. The grid, I mean, there's some infill lots and little bits here and there, but when you look at, say, Fire Station 33's area, or the east side of town, obviously, there's a lot more developable land out there. I think the previous 2 presentations really highlighted that. The thing I want to point out the most is if you look at it, there is, over the last couple of years, an escalating number or higher percentage of calls that we're running. I attribute that, obviously, because there's a population and that increases as we go on. Interesting also that you brought up, Councilmember Trace, about, or Matheny, I'm not sure which one, about our population leaving town during the day. During the day is actually our busiest time of day. From 11 o'clock in the morning till about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the wheels on the trucks go round and round. There's no other way to put it. These guys are just running from call to call. Our unit availability during that time period drops tremendously. In fact, there's rarely a day that we don't run out of an ALS transport rescue in the city during that time period. It's one of the things why we worked with the finance department, which I'd like to give kudos to Wendy back there for working with us to get additional personnel so we could put that 5th ALS transport unit in service. That has had a great impact on the amount of mutual aid we've either requested or needed. It's also been available to help the county out with some mutual aid here and there. Speaking of mutual aid, obviously we're going to kind of rule 2021 out just because there was a lot of things going on in the world at that point. And I think we've kind of all lived it and know what it's all about. But on average, you can see the mutual aid calls have kind of increased over time. That's because the county's growing on this side, and conversely, our mutual aid requests to them have grown. When you really narrow it down and you put it into a proportional ratio, you know, how many times do we go there to them coming to us? And it works out that somewhere between 4 and 5 times, and that number has stayed steady for the last 5 years. So the ratio is still pretty much the same. You know, the other thing to keep in mind is when we do request the county to come in, typically they are sending a lot more units to us than we have in the past to them. We need them on the larger fires. As an example, we all know the transfer station fire, largest fire loss in the history of St. Cloud. The St. Cloud had all of our units there with -1 rescue. Well, the county had just as many units there as we did. So when we do get those fires, when we do get those events, they are able to provide additional resources to us, and it's, again, a great partnership. I'm going kind of fast because the previous 2 presentations covered a great majority of what I was going to cover. As you know, our most recent arrival to our fleet is Engine 32 out off of Old Canoe Creek. That was purchased in 2021, $825,000 when it was all said and done, rounding up, rounding down to the nearest dollar, basically. It is the pride of our fleet. However, in the near future, we will have a nice brand new tower truck. That is not a picture of our tower truck as it will be, but it is very similar to what we'll have. Currently on order, we have 2 new engines, 1 new tower truck, and 2 rescues as we currently sit. $4.2 million that you have invested into our fire department, and we greatly appreciate it. The citizens will greatly appreciate it when we're able to provide better service to them. As everybody knows, that's primarily funded through the penny-cent sales tax. And we are, I would guess, I haven't really talked to Wendy about it, but I would say we are a predominant user of that penny-cent sales tax. We like to go to it. It's our go-to fund. We try to give back what we can, but we tend to spend a lot of it. Our current configuration, this is a slightly older map, but it kind of gives you a rough idea of where our 3 fire stations are in relationship to the city. Obviously, the green and the blue and the kind of purplish color are the city limits at that time. We've had some other annexations, but that also is a representation of where our fire stations are. In reality, we've heard Edgewater, Edgewater, Edgewater. The realistic part is the nearest county station is probably, well, from the first part of Edgewater, about 800 times further away than ours is. Ours is just over the overpass. So it only makes sense, that, in my opinion, that we would annex that, but that is ultimately your decision. the reality is anything that grows around us will impact us. Those vehicles, those people, they have to go somewhere, and they come into the city for services. They come into the city on our roads. So we are going to be impacted by the growth. It doesn't matter what we do. We can't build a wall around the city. It's going to happen. I think the best thing that anybody said here is if we get it while it's dirt, we can control not so much what goes there, but how it goes there and what it looks like. That also affords us the opportunity to receive the impact fees as opposed to it being developed in the county and later annexed into the city without us receiving any impact fees. Talking about our new fire stations, obviously we have the temporary fire station that's going in at Toho. They were out there today, I believe, doing the boundary survey for that property. The Toho is in the process of closing, or if they haven't already closed, the property for the permanent fire station, which will be at Breezewood and Neptune Road. We're in the process of rebuilding Fire Station 2. We got the go-ahead today to start the architect and engineering on that. And then, of course, we have Rowan Bridge, North Tyson, Center Lake, and Edgewater. One thing that we have been very proactive, and it was one of my first tasks as the deputy chief under Chief Sturgeon at the time, was to start getting property for future fire stations and start doing that strategic thinking on how to grow the fire department. Our anticipatory track currently sits that temporary fire station 35 will be open in October, with the permanent station opening sometime in 2023 or early 24. The new fire station, or the rebuild fire station on Old Canoe Creek, again, we're hoping for that to be around 2024, beginning of 2025. Rowan Bridge, the end of 26. And then as far as North Tyson or Center Lake, deciding which station at that point based off of the growth patterns and the call volume demand out there at that time. Edgewater, again, all of these developments that you see up here, Toho, Rowan Bridge, Center Lake, and Edgewater, we do have development agreements with those developers for property. And it's at our discretion if you'd like any additional information on that. Or I believe Edgewater isn't wrapped up yet, but it's in process. If you'd like any additional information on that, I'm sure City Attorney Manzares could give you information there. Based on the studies that we were looking at earlier, what we're looking at is call volume and saturation, call density, how many calls are happening in an area, what our level of service are. Those are all things that necessarily weren't totally accounted for in the previous study. So you'll see a little bit of a divergence in our years of needing those services. However, we're within a year or so of what all the modeling shows. So our ideas and what the models are showing are pretty spot on, especially looking at the outlying years. We started this process 8 years ago, and based off of the modeling we did 8 years ago and what the modeling is today, we're actually behind the 2 stations, as it said. So we were spot on 8 years ago, and we're still spot on now. It's just a matter of getting the fire stations open, getting personnel hired. Other projects that we're working on is the Fire Station 31 remodel. Originally, we had some money budgeted for that. That came in way over budget on the bids. So we're kind of piece parting that out and doing a little bit more diverging as far as her deciding what's a need versus a want going on with that. It literally came back at twice what we had budgeted. And the amount of scope of work, I have just about every firefighter saying they'd start a business to be able to do it themselves. I think this was probably one of those projects that most construction working people like myself did back in the day. They looked at it, realized, oh, there's not a whole lot of meat on the bone. We're going to throw something crazy at it and hope it sticks and hope they bite at it. And we didn't bite at it. We have the training facility, the Alan McAllister Training Complex, or Public Safety Complex, out off of Court Avenue. I was told by procurement today that that will be out to bid by the end of the month. As you know, that's about a 7,000 square foot building. It'll have classroom space for up to 100 people for a large scale thing, or 3 smaller classrooms. It has some operational classroom space for that. It also has office space for our fire prevention folks and training people. That whole facility will be remodeled out, and the grounds will be changed to facilitate our special operations training and our pump operations training. In the immediate future, as we look at fire stations and the growth patterns, And we talk about the JPA, where we're annexing and what we're looking at. I'm 100% on board with defining what those JPA boundaries are. But we need to take it even a step further than that, and we need to decide when and how we're going to annex those boundaries. Without having that knowledge or without having that direction from the council as it sits at that time, it makes it awfully hard for myself and our counterparts in the back of the room there to plan on the growth of fire departments. We do not want to be in the position that Orange County and Orlando are, where they've built stations literally about 2 miles apart from each other, or a mile apart from each other. It's not a good resource or use of finances from the citizens to do that. Having that knowledge would greatly enhance our ability to strategically plan and look into the future as far as when to bring stations online, how to bring them online, and what the makeup of those stations would be. And when I talk about the makeup, I talk about, is it an engine rescue station? Is it an engine rescue, a tower truck? Or maybe is it an engine and 2 rescues? Depending on the call volume and what the needs are in that community, you look at putting additional resources in those stations. A lot of times it's cheaper to do that than to build additional stations, obviously. Most of the developments described tonight, Edgewater, Fontana, part of Green Island, obviously those will have a huge impact on the city. A lot of them are inside or partially inside the JPA boundaries. We need to plan for those. At the end of the day, again, going back in time, based off of our level of service that's been adopted by the city council, I went through and did a basic study off of the roads that were there, the roads that we thought were going to be there. And I'm slightly off from the modeling that they have. I have it as 17 stations in the JPA versus the 15 that he was showing. At the end of the day, 2 stations in an area that size, it all comes down to interconnectivity and road networks. Without knowing what's there currently or going to be there in the future, that kind of modifies things. We did a lot by time distance travel, and obviously some of that was based off of concept plans, but concept plans change. Interconnectivity changed. We found that out tonight just by looking at what they were talking about on that development down off of Canoe Creek Road by Sullivan Road. They literally took a road and moved it a quarter or half of a mile north, right? So those things do have an impact. We have seen it impact other departments. There's a department locally to us that they live by the motto, you can't get there from here. They couldn't afford or couldn't buy property where they needed it at the time. They built a station, and then I think the 417 came and cut them off from the rest of their response area. Is that pretty much how that story went there, Chief? Yep. We don't want to be in that boat. So that's why it's important to have those strategic plans, those strategic meetings, and know what the network's going to look like. The 417 extension, the northern southern expressway extensions, vernacular really doesn't matter, but those will have an impact. Those are high-speed roadways. I think I can talk for my partner in the back there, Chief Collier. Although they're great for getting people around the areas, we don't like running calls on them. Plain and simple. High-speed roadways, they scare us. That's where you have a lot of bad accidents. That's where you get bad damage to your fire trucks. People get hurt, people get killed. I think we've heard that enough from the Turnpike meeting last week about, what the Turnpike looks like and the stacking of traffic. Again, as we currently look, if you look up there, we have 6 stations. That's the immediate forecasted future of where, based off of Rowan Bridge. Currently, I have the Nortice and Center Lake area all combined as one, but that'll grow and modify a little bit. The downtown district. And then, of course, 32, 33, and 35. A lot of that is broken out by parcel. Some of the things we notice as far as response is don't put the front side of a dead-end street on one response area, but the other side on a different response area. So we go through and we actually go through parcel by parcel looking at connectivity. Case in point, when we talk about if we're going to take parts or annex later in the JPA, there's actually segments of the JPA where it goes down and it leaves a half mile of a dead-end road outside the JPA. So that's something that, like you said, we need to look at for the JPA. Look at that interconnectivity. If there's no interconnectivity, then that whole stretch of that road should be inside the JPA because there's no other way to get there. It doesn't make sense to create a burden or a situation where the county may have to come in through the city to respond to an area. In the future, this is the part, hold on, Wendy, it's okay. I know, I'm just saying, it's okay. In the future, over the next 5 years, we're looking at needing 60 people at the fire department. We're hoping to do that primarily, with any hope, through the SAFER grant. We're about 2 weeks away from hearing if they're going to start awarding, or the starting of the awards for the SAFER grant, which this year, as you know, we applied for 15 positions. What I would like and hope for, is, and what my recommendation is every year that the SAFER grant is available in the future, that we should apply for it. Long-term effect, we will have to start absorbing those full-time equivalent employees downstream. And the funding for that SAFER grant does vary from year to year. Sometimes it's 100% for 3 years. Other years it's the de-escalation of how much they'll cover. But just like the COPS grant, it's a great avenue to bring people on board and reduce the immediate impact and allow for some growth to catch up with those salaries. Additionally, just touching on a couple other highlights, we do have our cadet program. We are looking at interacting with those high school to young adults, getting them sponsored, getting them into fire school. It is a great recruitment tool for us. When they're out there and they're trudging around the fire grounds and they're doing all the activities, or if they're lugging hose and stuff, you get to see what they're made of, and it's a great recruitment area that we can tap into. There's no better way to onboard somebody to see what you're getting than to do something like that. Additionally, we're looking at going into the paramedic schools, because retaining enough paramedics in the future for ALS care is going to be a challenge, and recruiting directly out of paramedic school if possible. The people who like to try to put the fire department out of business, as it's called, is the fire prevention personnel. In the future, we're going to have to greatly expand that. As it currently sits, we are attempting to get into every single business once a year. As we grow, obviously, there will be a much more higher demand on the fire prevention personnel. And I'd like to see that program expanded, obviously. It's not just fire prevention that these men and ladies do. They go into the schools, they teach our young kids fire safety in there. We do fire extinguisher classes. There's just a multitude of educational opportunities that we're not able to provide currently with the staffing that we have. Getting a public safety educator would be key. Having a public safety PIO would also be great. This is our cadets. They were doing some skills as far as practicing getting people out of pseudo-auto accidents. Along with this, they are sponsored or they are supervised by our regular firefighters. And they go to competitions. If you remember last year, I recognized them. They had scored a couple of trophies at a recent competition. Going back a slide for just a moment, when we talk about our personnel and SAFER grants and all these other things, the reason we're so, I guess, aggressive in trying to move forward with these 60 positions over the next 5 years is we have a goal to be an ISO of 1 in the next 2 years. We're going to need these positions to do that. That's partially what the ladder truck is for. And as an example, this last year, our personnel over at the fire department completed over 20,000 hours of fire training and EMS training in order to keep their accreditations up and to keep their certifications up, and to count that towards the ISO training. It's very important. Obviously, that's an economic driver. If we could get that ISO of 1, it would be a great benefit to the city, especially when it comes to a recruitment tool. These are just a couple of fun little pictures of our guys out training and then in some real-life applications. As you can see there, at our training grounds, we have a firefighter lieutenant outside practicing ventilating a structure. And then on the picture beside that, that was actually a little bit of an auto accident, and I guess the car caught fire. This was a lightning strike to a house that we ran recently. It was actually kind of difficult to get to. It was up actually in like a parapet wall area of the house, and they went up and had to cut some metal off of it to get down inside. This was some training we completed in partnership with Osceola County Schools. Prior to them demolishing the schools the last couple years, they let us go in there for about a week, and we got to tear them up. You know, it's every kid's dream to go into school and get some revenge on what happened to them growing up. So our guys took full advantage. They cut holes in the roof. They cut holes in the walls. I think they collapsed a section of the ceiling. So yeah, our guys, they enjoyed themselves in there. Again, the top picture here is a picture of our cadets. This is during one of their competitions. The bottom picture there that's actually one of our training exercises. We partnered with Parks and Rec and did some water safety training for our guys. And we are working on doing a open water rescue class for our guys. As the demand and as the city grows, we expect to see more pool-type rescues. We expect to see lakefront rescues. We do have quite a few lakes in the area. I don't know if anybody's ever noticed that. As we touch more lakes, we will need to probably have more boat rescues and injuries out on the lakes, so we need to be prepared for that. Also, if you do fall in the water with your bunker gear on, we do training on how to shed that gear and any of the equipment with you. And to a certain point, the gear will float for a little bit. It'll hold some air before it fully saturates and you start floundering like a fish. But yeah, we do a lot of training. Again, this is some more training. Just wanted to give you a highlight. This is our guys. They were doing some extrication training, some special ops training. They got to cut a car apart. They acted like there was a victim inside. This last year, thanks to the support of finance and the budget committee and you all, we were able to outfit our firefighters in technical rescue gear. That's the black gear that you see there. It's rated for technical rescue and for brush fires, which is great because it's a ton lighter, lets the heat get off the body a little bit easier, and it's a lot more comfortable to wear than structural gear. It'll also keep the structural gear repairs down when they can wear this other gear. Keeping that gear has to be inspected annually. It gets quite costly after a while repairing that gear. It's good all the way around. It helps with firefighter rehab. Again, just another picture of an extrication. I guess at the end of the day, our destiny obviously lies in the hands of the ad valorem, and it lies in the hands of the city council. I think between the two previous demonstrations, I think I've been before you now 3 times in my short tenure up here as fire chief. The need's there. We've already addressed one of the stations. In the future, we're going to have to address the other one very quickly, as well as the tower truck. And again, we thank you for all the support you've given it to us this far, and we look forward to more support in the future. And if you have any questions.
Well, we certainly thank you, Chief Miller, for that presentation, and we certainly appreciate all of the fire and EMS and rescue personnel that serve our city. Thank you for your faithful service.
And one more thing, it is EMS week, so thank your first responders.
Councilmember Askew.
Knowing that I went through a couple of your training before there, I think Mr. Urban down there is itching to do some training with you all and tear apart some cars and go
It's
through
coming.
some
Okay. I've got preliminary plans, but it probably won't be till the weather cools off.
And I appreciate, through the years, you brought me into Station 31. You showed me what the future's looking like. So I really don't question what you're asking for. I know there's a need for it, and we probably have the best fire department in Osceola County. No offense back there.
We'll take it.
Yeah.
We don't mind.
So we really appreciate you guys and everything you do, especially in the parades and everything. So thank you. And pink heels.
No more lights?
Thank you.
Sweet.
I'll
Thanks.
get you. Oh, no, since you said it. So back to that image that showed the zones once you add A, B, C, and D. Yeah, that one.
Mayor, can I say something to Mr. Trace?
Perfect.
It sounds like he needs to run for reelection.
Yeah, no, thanks. So the Toho station,
Yes.
on the far end of the boundary, if we don't decide to annex anymore, like how does that work? That just become like a
It's kind of that outlying station, but that was also put in there with the anticipation that we were going to go a little further west with the JPA area and absorb that in. I don't really want to go out on a limb without talking to the city manager, but I have some ideas as far as that west side. But I'll talk about those later on.
well, and when we're looking at that, is that one of those of like, do I just go down Neptune Road, drive 5 minutes, and that's kind of where the end of it should be?
Kind of, sort of, in the future, maybe. But I think that also depends on what my partner back there in the back is doing. I will tell you that my third partner, who might be hiding back there, I can't see behind me, I think that whole area in between Kissimmee and St. Cloud, along the 192 corridor and the Neptune Road corridor, needs to have a very specific study done to it and what the best course of action would be for the local fire departments and how to cover that area.
Well, yeah, Quonset huts, right? We need more of those.
No. We need Category 4, Category 5 rated structures to protect.
Which is
our
why
guys.
I'll give you my
But-
gripe every time I do
I
about that
know.
temporary fire
I know,
station.
you and your, I get it, but no, I think honestly, with the Toho station there, I think that whole Neptune and 192 corridor need a good look at by the three departments. And there may be some avenues that we can take to more efficiently provide some services over there across the board.
Well, and that's my worry about, so we have two stations very close, but on the east side of the turnpike. We have one on the west side, but the one on the west side's on an island because there's not a road that connects it to any of the Edgewater property, right? The road through that triangle piece. I guess whenever we're going through some of these land use decisions or even any of the stuff that the county's doing on the west side of the turnpike, just going more in depth into fire response time in some of these discussions, right? Because this is like the one thing we need to do as a city is provide life safety services, right? Police and fire. So like, we gotta get
And I will
right.
tell you, even though we are over our approved response time, our guys do it very well. Every time there's an issue, we step up. I mean, we proved that February 8th of last year when we pulled all the young children out of that fire. What I can tell you about that area and that Spine Road or the Cross Prairie Parkway, that bridge has got to be built. There's no ifs, there's no ands, there's no buts about it. That bridge has to be built because we at the fire department, meaning myself and our team back there, when we're looking at this, it has to be built because we're counting on the Edgewater Fire Station to be the second in truck over there. Fire Station 32 would probably be the third in fire truck over there to get an effective firefighting response force there in a timely manner for your ISO rating. So that interconnectivity is key. That bridge, we're banking on it.
Yeah.
And that goes the same for Kissimmee Park Road. Realistically, depending on how these developments come and if we take them into the city, all of Kissimmee Park Road is going to be an annex, realistically.
Yeah, once we go, we're
Once
all
we
the way.
go,
Yeah.
we either need to decide we're going to go or not go. But then if we don't go, that's going to create a problem for that guy back there.
Well, and that's like, Shady Lane can't go away until that bridge is connecting because no one can service anyone else. And the Toho station and the Shady Lane station almost rely on each other because that's the only.
They will in the
backup.
future, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I fully expect that fire station at Toho will run quite a bit of mutual aid over there backing up his personnel, and I fully expect them to back us up over there. The plain and simple fact is once all this construction starts, especially bridge construction, that's one of the reasons why we're pushing so hard to get that station open. Because once the bridge construction starts, we can't get across the bridge necessarily, particularly if traffic's backed up. Here on 192, occasionally, and I stress occasionally because I don't like it, you'll see our vehicles go opposing traffic in the wrong lane going the wrong direction, right? You won't see them doing that over a bridge because they can't see cars coming at them. So that's why there's such the push to get this station open over there to get some fire coverage.
And on the models, I guess when we're talking through drive time models, the county did a great job of laying out framework streets, and our transportation master plan has framework streets for kind of the core city area. Can we lay those in there and just bank on that road being built and then just force it as it comes through the process?
And we've actually kind of already done that. Where it gets a little squirrely is down south, like in Green Island, stuff like that, where we haven't really touched. We were just looking actually of doing a little interconnectivity project on city property through the ranch, actually, along the one border, which will greatly enhance the response capabilities of the Center Lake project. The 12 Oaks Road, from its original concept plan to where it is now, it actually aligns a little bit better with that property there, and it creates some good alignment. I think it's with Zuni or one of those over there. But it requires a little bit of property from the ranch to make it happen, and we'll have a great ability to go from Center Lake straight onto Jones Road. It's about a mile, so.
Okay. And then A and D are very close together.
A and D, that would be probably, I don't have the map in front of me.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is, sorry. A and D, they are as the crow flies. However, again, when we're talking about interconnectivity, one is Nora Tyson and the other one's Center Lake. So the interconnectivity is not there currently. However, if there is some great interconnectivity, we could look at making one of those either move further south, further east, further west to allocate those needs.
Well, and that's part of what my thought is do we just build that road to connect it, even if we have to fully fund it? Because designing and building a fire station for what, $5 million, plus putting apparatus in it for $2 or $3 million, plus 10 heads in it all day, every day. kind of adds up, right?
It does add up. I think you'd probably be looking closer to 6 to 7 for a fire station currently. The price of construction is just ridiculous right now.
Quonset huts.
No. Did I say no? Let me say no again. I think Chief Collier is actually in the process of trying to get rid of some Quonset huts. No, we don't want them.
Fire sale. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Miller.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We have one final report, our Fire, Police, Parks, and Rec Impact Fees report.
So patiently waited too.
Update. Have we saved the best to last?
Yes. Excuse me. Best and most brief.
All right.
You all have seen this. Good
Your
afternoon.
name?
I'm Joe Williams from Ruff-Tellis. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. You all have seen this presentation previously, I believe February or March timeframe. And we're back as an update to meet statute requirements for holding 2 publicly noticed workshops to discuss the extraordinary needs of the city in regards to collecting impact fees and implementing those impact fees at certain increases or timeliness from your current impact fees to meet the extraordinary needs that you have. So I'm just going to go through this a little bit here. One of the newest things added to the Florida statutes was limitations on how a municipality can address their impact fees. And you see here in item B and C, there's certain provisions that if you're increasing up to 25% or between 25% to 50%, there's phase-in limitations that you can have on your fees. Item D says that you may not increase above 50%, and item E says you cannot increase more than once every 4 years. Now, there is one, it got kind of lengthy, but there is one additional provision here, F, which provides an exception, and there's a policy, there's criteria that go with it. So you have to have 2 publicly noticed workshops to discuss the need. This is the first one. You have to have a study demonstrating that there's a need. That would be the study that we did supporting the impact fee calculations. And then finally, once you're at your second reading of the ordinance, you have to have at least a 2/3 vote. So with having 5 votes, you'd have to have 4 out of 5, rounding up to be above that 2/3 limitation. So this is part of the process. And, really the reason we're here is because you have extraordinary growth and you have extraordinary needs on your services to meet that growth. And if you're not assessing the impact fees that are maximum justification, then ultimately you're relying on other revenue sources, ad valorem and others, which are already limited and strained to make up the difference that growth would otherwise be providing. You've heard a lot about fire. For police, there's a significant investment plan for a new public safety facility. I believe, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, it's about $40 million investment. Let me see, we may have. We have partially funded from the growth over the next 10 years. You can see on the left side, the second line item, funding for new public safety buildings. So that's partial funding of that building as we allocated it proportionally to growth and existing development and future development as well. So resulting on the police and fire side, single-family fees are not increasing by significant amounts. It's about 7% on police, 20% on fire. So those outside of this process would have been phased in over 2 years. Really what we're trying to capture here is the multifamily, is we did some different analysis this time. We looked at the densities per unit, the types of demands that they have on your system, and justified higher ratios than you previously had. So they're increasing at police 73%, fire 94% from the existing fees. So there's significant demand that outside of doing this extraordinary needs process for the statute, you wouldn't be able to increase those fees to that level. You'd be maxed out at a 50% phased in over 4 years. So that'd be significant, revenue not collected that would have to be made up from other sources. And to jump ahead a little bit to parks, you're making significant investment in your parks as well. And that fee here for single-family and multifamily is increasing about the same. It's about 56% increase on the park side as well. And it's a significant dollar amount here. So any growth that happened over the next 4 years, if you were phasing in, you'd be missing a significant amount of revenue that could be used to fund your park investment, your park facilities. So, that's really the message that we wanted to demonstrate, is that you have significant needs. This is part of the statute process, why I'm back here, to just make sure we're discussing this. You have a chance to just kind of discuss it again and make sure everyone's on the same page, that when you get to that second reading, there's certain requirements on the voting and everything else to get the fees fully in place. Otherwise, you're going to be looking at a phase-in after that. So I think that pretty much sums up my purpose. And I'm happy to answer any questions or discussion.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Matheny?
Thank you. Thank you so much for this. This was my thing that I said I didn't understand why the multifamily got such a discount, because you have the same number of people living in a multifamily unit with 3 bedrooms as you do in a house. So I really appreciate that. And this question might not be for you, but like maybe Mr. Manzaro, like approximately how long until this is in effect? Because we'll have to have a second reading. Then you have to give some 90 days.
Right, there's a 90-day provision.
So are we like
once
4 months out, or where,
I don't, do we have the second workshop scheduled yet?
Anyone?
We have a
Anyone?
workshop scheduled
Anyone?
for June, so
Bueller?
we could do the second one then. It only takes a couple minutes. We just have to have the public.
And I'll just offer, I don't know if there, this might be for legal, but I don't think there's necessarily a specific order that the statute says the workshops
No, it doesn't.
have
It
to
just says you
happen
have to do them. So
before.
you could, I guess what you're referring to is, you could run them sort of
Congruently?
contemporary and concurrently to get it done. We obviously have to wait for final adoption of the ordinance without doing anything. That's pretty inherent. But we could do introduction of the ordinance. We could squeeze a workshop in between those. I can look at it. We may even be able to consider the introduction of the ordinance as the second workshop, because that would be done at a public meeting. But the problem with this is we need to be as conservative, belt and suspenders as possible. This is a new statute. Not a lot of entities have gone through it. There's been no court review of this stuff as of yet. I'm sure there'll be people down the road that fight other cities on it, so we're going to be as conservative as possible.
So like conservatively, this could be in place, being charged in like 6 months?
Yeah, I would
So
think
that's
so.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying. You don't want to get too wild, but
leave that up
would like
to
to
you.
keep it moving. Like, don't let it fall off into this, oh, we forgot about it pile or something. Great. Thank you.
Do we have any other question? If not, thank you very much for your presentation, and we look forward to continuing working with you here.
Thank you.
You'll be glad to know there's nothing else on our agenda. I'd like to thank once again our guests from the county and from the city of Kissimmee for being with us today. Thank you for this long investment of your time. And from Toho, thank you. We're dismissed.
Oh, I thought he said Miss Smith. I was like, who's Miss Smith?
Nope.
He's snacking. He's snacking.